or almost on time. They're here. They're having a good time. They're glad we're arriving. Good morning, everyone. Hello, Internet. Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. That means you have been paid for, and that makes you immortal now. And he's not going to be long anyway in making that more than just a promise for your faith. That's going to be a resurrection body for everybody's sight, the whole world. The water seals it, food feeds it. This is Christianity. You should think about joining us. You have found Stop the White Noise with Jonathan and Meridith. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Meridith.
And Stop the White Noise is brought to you by Mad Christianity and the Hebron Collegium. Check those out, madpxm.com and Hebron Collegium, Gap Year Bible School for Men here in Lakewood Hills, Illinois, thehebroncollegium.com. A little bit more about that maybe coming up later. Is your mic sufficient for you?
I don't know. Like, it's really far away. How does that sound?
It sounds all right, but I would rather you twisted the whole thing so that it angled the other way.
Like that?
I think that, and then push it so it's as toward you as it can be. Yeah, and then can that
so now
come this way just a touch? I mean, you look good. I can see you. Yeah, it's pretty good. There's a little mic coverage on your face, but isn't it? But
how does it sound now?
It sounds good.
Last time, I feel like we moved the chair forward, so I don't know. Maybe you moved it back.
This is good. That's good. Same sound. So everyone, we're so thankful that you appreciate the what do you call it? The humble, realistic editing, processing, tech. You know, it's not canned. And we're glad that you like that and you put up with it. So
I found it really interesting. When you got up, suddenly I was a lot brighter. Oh, I guess
you do know that I emit light, right? I think I was probably reflecting the light from the window onto you a bit more. And yeah, the issue with brightening your space means basically taking that white card off of that light bulb so that it's in your eyes again. And that's sort of, yeah. Now, you just...
Because I bumped it, with my shoulder. I was thinking if we were able to somehow both be facing the window, then...
It'd be hard to face each other then. Let's talk about this one later. I don't mind new ideas for the studio. That's all good. But hey, everybody, again, we're glad you're here for your questions, Bible answers, and, of course, some of our nonsense as we try to stop the white noise in our own lives, continuing to believe that the beast, the world power, the Nimrodian Empire, as Carl and Dalic like to call it, it has not been sleeping these 150 years of freedom in America, but has been gradually sending its tentacles out and striving to set up Antichrist and destroy the Christian church. This is not a new game. This is an old game, right? But we are here living right in front of you, our own version of how do you fight back with this. And so we're glad you're here along for the ride. Your questions, comments, and likes are always welcome. That helps our algorithm. I had this moment this morning where I'm like, you know what? I don't do this very often because when I do, I usually feel bad afterwards. I went and I looked at the comments on the YouTube videos.
Oh.
And the thing about that is, like, most of the comments on my channel, we're not really getting promoted out there in the middle of the crazy. And so most of the people who find the channel want to find the channel. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of positive comments there. Mm-hmm. But the way that comments work is that it doesn't matter how many positive comments were there, especially that was great. Like that doesn't mean much. And then you get this like paragraph of how you're evil and you say stupid stuff, right? But I've learned to kind of appreciate those a little bit, although they still make me feel bad. But the one this morning, she said she was mad at the algorithm for showing her our video. And that's kind of a good thing. That means that we are having enough impact on the algorithm to be in the algorithm and shown to people who have no interest in Christianity whatsoever. And so that's a good thing. So that's what questions, comments, and likes helps with, right? So the more you can click that like button, I mean, I know it's annoying. You got to wiggle your arm for a minute. And it is annoying that we make you do these things. This is what I hate about technology is all these little hoops you got to jump through. You're like a rat in a cage. But if you could, while you're being a rat in a cage, help us, it'd be great, right? And your commentary on the side, that's always good stuff. New questions for us to answer, send those to madpxm revpxm.com through the contact page there. And while you're there, sign up for Mad Christian Mondays, best newsletter on the internet. And you can find everything else that I and we do at RevFisk, RevFisk.com, including how to support us at Patreon and or Subscribe Star. One more announcement for everybody this morning before we jump into what Meridith found interesting this week.
Oh.
And that is that we have plans and preparations for the 3rd annual Sons of Solomon muster in Lakewood Hills, Illinois, just outside of Rockford. This is something that happens and hopes to happen going in perpetuity, a Memorial Day weekend, both Sunday night and Monday day. And feel free then, the plan is to have people able to arrive Sunday afternoon, men mainly. You can bring your families, but the events are for the men. Arriving Sunday afternoon, you can tour the Hebrew Collegium, and there also is a chance to check out the only martial art mentioned in the Bible. That is, there's going to be an open mat for
only
wrestling.
Martial art mentioned in the Bible. Oh, because of Jacob?
It's correct.
Wow.
Correct. There's more going on than meets the eye, and that is the truth of Christianity again. So, chance to check that out. Join us on the mat if you've had some experience, or if you'd like a little tutoring. Just be careful. Your first time on a mat for sure. Always Sunday night, there's a prayer vigil at St. Paul Lutheran Church. Monday morning, we meet downtown. There'll be a parade going on. We muster and, if possible, hand out Sons of Solomon's Daughter of Wisdom booklets to people. We haven't really planned that as much the last few years, but I want to try to get that to be more in the headlights this year, as that's kind of the goal, is to make an impact on Rockford, and you can help us do that. And then we retire to the lakeside, where Hebrew Collegium and I and my family reside, for some barbecue and networking. You can get to know those other Sons of Solomon practitioners out there, see what they're doing, how they're trying to help men's groups, ladies groups get started in their congregations, how they're trying to bring biblical piety into their homes. It's a great time of support. Contact at sonsofsolomon.net for more info, including lodging options, because generally there's help available if you need it. There's options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exciting. It's always a fun event.
It was and is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And to see all the different men gather and from where they gather, hear their stories.
Yeah.
It's always been fun.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a speaker lined up for that, or are you going to be the speaker?
There is no speaker, because it's effectively, we're going to gather. I'll teach you some jiu-jitsu if you want. We're going to gather. There'll be a prayer vigil service, which is no preaching at that.
Right.
And then in the morning, we just get together and talk. And then the goal is to bridge out. Oh, I guess I may this year. This is just it. I'm talking out loud. I'm planning. I just got the notice from Titus saying this is all happening. But this would be the year that downtown, I want to be prepared to gather everyone with the packets and give a little speech about, let's hand these out. But that's not a speaker really, right? So the goal is just to mill about and be Christians in downtown Rockford during a celebration. There's a coffee shop right off the walk there and all that stuff. So, and then when we come back to the barbecue, the goal is not any one man commands anyone's attention for any length of time, but you are free to be brothers and gather in a big circle or a little circle, whatever you need to do. Yeah. So in that sense, everyone who comes gets to be a speaker. Yeah. They're going to, God willing, share some wisdom from Scripture. They've been meditating on the Proverbs for a year or 3. I'm sure they'll say something of value. Guarantee it. Yeah. So you're welcome to come and join us for that.
If I were a man and I were planning to come, what should I plan to bring?
Lawn chairs. Yeah.
No Bible. No crucifix.
Well, no. If you're a son of Solomon, if you practice Son of Solomon discipline, all the way. It's not a law. It's not a vow. You can do half of it, and you're still a Christian. It's all cool. But if you do all of it, then you will always have your Bible.
Right.
You don't leave the house without your Bible, and you always have your crucifix. You always wear a crucifix. So those things are just kind of par for the course.
So
what you're going to need at the barbecue is a place to sit by the lake, and as much as my what would you call them? Upcycled metal lawn art chairs can hold a male body. I don't know, you guys. You don't need that. You want your own comfy, yard folding chair that you are used to and for hanging out with everybody. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lawn chair, and then there's barbecue. So
on that barbecue, the way that works is that following the downtown event, we parade back ourselves to a place called Pinnins Meats, a local meat market here on the west side of Rockford, a staple of life and one of the most important landmarks in that regard for what ongoing family community means in a largely forgotten part of the world. The farthest dark end of Chicago. And we go there, buy some meats, get your steak, whatever you want. They got ribeyes, they got stuffed pork, they got, everything you could possibly think. And come back, we'll have the grill going. You throw that on the grill. Feel free to bring other stuff to share. You're going to need your own drinks. Like we're not providing food. We're providing a grill. It's a big, giant open picnic. That's what you do on Memorial Day, right? You have a big picnic.
Nice.
So, and if you want to bring a big thing like this, like I made these, this, that, and everyone can have one. Like you can do that, but you don't have to do that. It's not a potluck. We're not trying to make everyone eat from what everyone else brings. Bring your own food.
Yeah.
But gifts are always cool. So I know individuals in the past have brought cognac and bourbon and glasses for people to drink in them. You can definitely bring your fine procured tobacco product, not cigarettes. No, it's not what I said. But those who enjoy the pipe or the leaf as a roll, the cigar. That's happened in the past and probably will happen again for the guys. And that always helps segregate the guys from the girls. The guys go smoke. So, it's just good times. And again, contact at sonsofsolomon.net to get more information for your own journey over here. We got people locally who are willing to help to make it possible for you to get here. So
if I haven't plunged into Sons of Solomon, but I'm kind of curious, and I'm somewhat dabbling with the different psalms. Like, would this be a good event for me
Absolutely.
to come to?
Yeah, you're going to figure out what it does to guys. Okay. You're going to see something you either want to be or don't want to be. I hope you're going to want to be. What I've found most fascinating about these events is that the individuals who come are not like me, except for in this way. And it's the most important of ways. So instead of going to some like Star Trek conference where they're also not like me, except in this way, but it's like not the most important of ways, but we're all dressed up as if it were religious. Yeah. Well, you'll find that these guys who have, and ladies who come, they're the wives usually who are daughters of wisdom devotees. What you'll find is that their hunger for knowing the truth of the Word of God and just letting that be like the thing in their life is just quietly refreshing. And everyone's just they've got that in their back pocket, and it builds a real cool rapport. So if you're like wanting to explore Sons of Solomon or ask people like, how do you even do it? I mean, there's always advice. I know one guy locally, he sets 4 alarms on his phone,
nice.
And it goes off every day, and he just goes right into it. So, and what is Sons of Solomon? For those of you who don't know, I mean, it's a tract. That's what it is. It's a tract. It's an idea that is meant to be handed out to people who are not Christians or barely Christians in order to get them to make a decision for their Christianity, not for their salvation. I want to hasten to add, because most tracts lead to more of a decision salvation kind of thing. They're built as a small document that you pick up, and by the time you're done, you've decided you're a Christian now. Yeah. So it is a tract, but it doesn't ever say make a decision for Jesus or anything like that. And it doesn't really propagate the cross first. The cross is there. The Ten Commandments, Creed, and Lord's Prayer are like right there after the Psalms that you're asked to pray. And the goal is to get you there, but to get you there by asking you first just to pray to Jesus. Like before I do anything else, just pray to Jesus for wisdom because he'll give it. Like you don't need to ask me why I think that's true. I'm just telling it to you as a proposition. Pray to Jesus for wisdom and do what he says to get it, and you'll get it. You'll have wisdom. Do that for a year. Can't fail you. Can't fail you, right? You can say that to anybody. You can say that to a Roman Catholic. You can say that to a Baptist. You can say that to a Hindu. It doesn't matter. So it's a tract for spreading Christianity to men that they might spread it to their families, that also then drives toward the idea of patriarchy being a good thing, that is the fourth commandment is a good thing, that is honoring your father and your mother is a good thing, that is authority is given from above to those below, for those further below still, that those who are above might serve those who are below with that authority as a protector, a guide, and all these things. So trying to drive men into Christianity's teaching about that, which ultimately provides for them eyes to see the world clearly. And my hope, my prayer, and a couple others, but it's my brainchild, when I started this is, okay, what would it be like, goodness gracious, I don't know if I should say it this way, but it's true. What would it be like if we had a Christian movement that operated with the, what do you call it, the strategic polity of Antifa? How does Antifa operate? As an idea, mostly. There are people who have power and money who commit to Antifa. There are people who cosplay as actual rioting, violent people, right? So none of that is really what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about that the way Antifa works is they put their message out there and they tell everyone who hears it that they have the power to use it and be it, so that somewhere where they aren't, someone who's already there says, I agree with them, I am, and they just claim the name for themselves. And then they begin doing the work of Antifa in that space. Well, Sons of Solomon lets you do that with Christianity and men in any space. It doesn't replace church and pastors. It drives you, I hope, to that. But what it can do then again is unite men of various Christian bodies in our creedal belief, our central beliefs about the Trinity and Jesus, not so that we could pretend that the differences between the churches don't exist, because they do, and they're diabolical factions that have always been built upon deception and lie and twisting of Scripture. So that's all still there. But if we're ever going to have unity, we have to build on where we're unified. And if we can't be unified in agreeing that Jesus has risen from the dead, that his Psalter in his name is his prayer book, and that the Proverbs in his name is his wisdom, well, then what are we ever going to agree about? Nothing. So, but I don't expect the whole world to agree. I just expect Christians who find this document and try it to be like wonderfully surprised by how quickly it changes their devotional life, especially if they've been feeding on the cotton candy that most people are feeding on, which is mainly, here, I'll buy this book from said company. It's about the Bible. It talks about Bible verses. It quotes Bible verses. It maybe is very, very good. I've written a couple of these books, right? But they're not the holy psalms of Jesus Christ, And so, you'll find the Holy Spirit enters into you through these things, and it is marvelous. So there you go. I don't know. I probably could say more, but I think it's a good pitch.
Yeah, I like it.
So we were supposed to talk about what you found interesting this week.
Oh, is that's all of our intros, huh?
I don't know. I got other
Very
stuff.
good.
I mean, I've got other thoughts, but whatever. I don't know.
Okay, so first of all, I found while I was vacuuming and tidying up the house yesterday, a sticker that I'd shoved around for a little while, just kind of avoided because I don't know where it came from. And so I figured since somebody left it, it must be important to someone.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a sticker that says "Stay Salty," and it's just black and white, almost like a bumper sticker, but it's smaller. So it'd be like you put it on your water bottle or something.
You put it wherever you want to put it.
And at first I was like, oh, that's cool. And then... And truly that has a place. Maybe it's from some sort of company that's a coastal company. And so staying salty is a reference to that
Salt
lifestyle or whatever.
That. I like that.
And then potentially it came in a salt packet that you use. So maybe that it's just encouraging us to continue to buy these salt packets to rehydrate. And
I think the idea is that you want to have salt in your body.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the company. But I'm pretty sure that it's also a play on words, because to be salty is to be spicy, is to be a little bit rough around the edges, frictional even, yeah?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the joke, is like, stay salty, my friends, or whatever. But what it is selling you is the idea that magnesium, potassium, and sodium are necessary elements for your body to ingest on a regular basis. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. And that, indeed, some people, like me, buy supplemental drink packs to help with that, since no matter what you eat, magnesium is going to be deficient almost. I mean, it's just really hard to get magnesium.
Right.
And potassium's not exactly everywhere. And yeah, I know a banana. I get it. There's so much sugars in a banana. So, yeah.
So but I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, truly that has a place, because somebody has made this sticker, and so it must be a good thing.
Well, the reason I left it on the counter was because our children like stickers. And I figured that it'd be gone within a day.
Regardless of what it says.
Because in the past, that has been the
sticker.
I have never seen a sticker not disappear. In all my years of thought, if I leave a sticker there, someone, is this sticker for me? Can I take a sticker? I mean, it's just right away, right? So,
well, I guess
this one just wasn't good
reaping
enough.
the fruits of training the child up in the way he or she should go, because nobody wanted the sticker. And as I thought about it, like,
surfboard.
I understand, like, I seriously was sitting there trying to justify the sticker. And, like, truly, I shouldn't throw that away, because stay salty. There must be something beneficial about this
salt and
concept.
light. You can take it salt and light. It's straight
Well,
biblical.
that's
Be
true.
salty, you know?
That's
You're
true.
supposed to cleanse the wound. And yeah, it's going to hurt sometimes. Why are you being all like, Metro? Be salty instead. So it's... I don't know. It's neither here nor there. What do you make of it?
I guess the reason I even brought it was because the typical thought behind being a salty person is kind of someone who, like, if my daughter were to come to me and say, this and this happened and I'm a little salty about it, it's like, I'm kind of bitter. I'm kind of just... I'm holding a grudge. And
it's anger. Anger is what's there somehow.
And I just didn't know that was really something that I should take on as a mantra. Oh, how would we say this? As like a
regular set of words you see in your life, a regular input.
Like a mindset.
It's a medium. The sticker's a medium, and it's going to talk to you whenever you see it. So unless you repurpose it, upcycle it to mean to you, Jesus has declared me to be salt and light.
Right, which I like that one. That's good.
And then that's what it means to you. And then anyone who asks, you tell them, well, it's about salt, but like that you drink, but I like the Christian element of it. Don't you think that they meant to be like rude? Well, maybe, but that's not what I mean, and I live here. So these are my words, right? Like, this is the Lutheran thing, right? Just because someone over there says the words mean that doesn't mean the words mean that. Like, they mean that over there, but here where we're talking, they mean whatever we say they mean. Now, I'm not saying that words have no meaning. I'm saying they are context driven, right? And so in my home, if every time I look at that and every time I say it to my children, it means Christianity. Yeah. Well, then you can come in and say, well, the people over there think it means that. Well, that's fine. To them, it means that, and they're wrong.
Right.
So because for us, it's leading us toward Christ, right? So we're going to hold on to that. And you can't take that meaning away from us. Even though when I say they're wrong, like they can say it means be rude, and that's funny, and well, they're wrong in the sense that that's just a dumb thing to do. But they can say they're right about their own understanding of the words. You can use the word salty that way. That's fine, but that's not how we're using it, and that their misuse of it has no bearing on our proper use of it. Right. So we don't stop talking about following Jesus just because we might be misunderstood as talking about decision theology because somebody else does that, right? Oh wait, we do that though. We do stop talking about. Sorry, this is my beef, right? I'm salty about the Lutheran abandonment of biblical language in the name of not being misunderstood by false teachers.
Well, and rightly so. I think I
said that really well.
Yeah, I think you did too. The point that I'm trying to make.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Because this is about me, right?
Well, it is.
No. The point that I'm trying to bring to light, though, is that the fact that it was on a sticker, the fact that it was written down and produced by somebody made me believe it had value, regardless of what it said and whether I believed it.
Yeah.
I actually looked at it and was like, truly, that does not, I can't, like I said, I cannot justify that.
Yeah.
Because saltiness is something that I, as a human trying to...
What's going on my desk now? Like I'm gonna put it on my desk as a sticker, and I'm gonna stay salty.
I love that you were able to put our Christian
Bible.
worldview behind it.
The Bible did it. The Bible does the beauty of it. The more you know of it.
Yeah.
I want this to be encouragement to y'all, because I've been on YouTube doing Bible stuff for a long time. It's not like
just a little bit.
It's not like you can go and be like, well, that guy never studied nothing. No, it's pretty clear. I've looked. If you want to go find, I've looked. I've talked about it. I've considered. I might be wrong, but I've done my homework. A year, less than a year, of Horner method. The Hebrew Collegium Bible reading, deep Bible reading. I'm shocked by how many things are coming out of my mouth in places I didn't expect them to, that are biblical references, that I just read that week, kind of thing. How that large contingent of input just becomes gradually the output. Like I don't have to try.
Absolutely.
I don't have to try, right? And things that just blow me away in terms of connection points. So it's like, stay salty. Oh, that's like a curse word. Yeah, unless Jesus said it. And he did. Look at that. He did. He actually said it. So I love that reliability of the word in me. So that when other messages come in, the framework they have to bounce off of is what the Bible says. And if it doesn't fit right away, I'm like, it doesn't fit. And if it fits right away. And it's in ways that aren't just sort of dogmatic, but are story-driven and about the identity of the man, Jesus Christ himself, specifically about kingdom, right? About eschatology, the end of the world, and all these things. So yeah.
That kind of leads into something else that I've been thinking about. It's the concept that you've brought up a few times. And where is the place, or what is the value of story in our life?
That's a really good question.
I recently came across an article that was talking about that very question. And the concept behind it was that, essentially, you can go back and you can look at story as all of them being something that we trace back to the story of Christ. And so the greatest story ever told is the true story of Jesus Christ, his life, his death, his resurrection. And that concept actually is, let's see, there's like this monomyth idea. Have you ever heard of that?
Probably, but not by that.
It's the concept of
There's
the
only one story.
monomyth is that in order to create the classical hero, he has to have a divine birth, have an initiation, have a preparation for this grand feat, and then a resurrection and an atonement. And so if you look at classical literature, the heroes will follow that.
That pattern.
Yes.
Yeah, the hero quest.
But
it's divine. Yeah, divine hero quest.
Right. Yes. And so like the story of Christ has all of the meaning of mythologies and all of the truth of realities, because Christianity is the true myth, is the concept that was being played with. But then like the idea behind why we tell stories is that, at least what was brought out of this article, was that all humans, adults and children, desire to be heroes. And so leading that desire to be a hero is that we want our life to be a story.
Mm-hmm. Our life is a story, and we are presciently aware of that fact.
Yeah. And so essentially what we're doing by going to stories is we're actually trying to find meaning in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. Man's search for meaning. Let me see here. Story is search for meaning. You're giving me like good thoughts here that are aligned with other things I've been thinking about recently. So, I really am thankful for you bringing this up. Please,
you're welcome.
If you got more, go.
Well,
I
do. Like, it goes so deep because,
well, then
the concept is like, as you read stories and you desire to have your life be a story, the reason that we connect to, or we seek out that perfect story that's going to take us to a different emotion or place that day, is because our brains think like, well, if stories must have plots, if there must be a plot to each story, then so must my life. And that's where the idea of my life having meaning, because stories have plots, comes from. So, like, people who are going through troubled times or depression, the best therapy is for them to see their life as a meaningful story.
Yeah, I don't mind that. Yeah, I think there's a better way to get there.
If you think about, like, so the whole monomyth, was it monomyth? Is that what what it's called?
Yeah.
Idea that Christ is truly at the center of every great, like, it's because of who Christ is and what he did that we can create these great stories. You know, that move us.
The first time I was on Issues, Etc., I think, was because I wrote an article in New Jersey on this idea.
Yes.
Yeah, remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, wow, like this is kind of coming full circle. And you've been struggling with this concept of like, why tell stories? What is the point?
Right, which if you're viewing, you can see RevFisk.com. You got to go into the archives a bit, but there's 2 articles on writing fiction from December, I believe. And both of them are me kind of struggling with, what is the purpose of story? What good is it? And a lot of this for me is because we live in a time where the gluttony is an overindulgence of leisure. And so as a Christian, it's like, can I feed that? Should I feed that? I mean, there's times and places where it would be fine because we're not all gluttonously destroying civilization trying to entertain ourselves. And so telling a story on Friday night, great idea. We don't live there right now. So I'm wrestling with what that means and how to use my time, not for what I want that would be beautiful, but for what I know will be good here. And so, but in that, definitely having to recognize, let me click over to the other one there so they can stay and look at that picture for a while. There's only one story. And it's not, what I don't like about the way that the article kind of leaves it, it's like it treats stories, the way I hear it talked about, it's like it's treating the stories like all stories are kind of not real except Jesus' story. But what it is that all stories are eminently real as part of Jesus' story. So sure, all good stories that you tell for entertainment will need to reflect the divine hero quest They must, or you will be bored, or you're going to like kill each other afterwards because you're living in a barbaric society where it's just is meaningless chaos, and that's what's going to come, to you. But every civil society is going to be centered around the divine hero quest as a way of viewing every man's life as the pursuit of good, right, or even the pursuit of heaven through religious structure. But I think that's just so you can look at a myth from wherever, or you can look at Star Wars and you can see how, oh, look, they had to borrow from Jesus there, and there. They couldn't tell the story without Jesus. Look at that, and you can do that. But I think that's a secondary tier to the fact that all stories are part of Jesus' story.
Right.
So that the Marvel timeline is true as a fantastic tale, a tall tale told in our historical lifetime as a distraction from Christianity. And it then interplays with Christianity in terms of finds its meaning from how do Christians react to it? What's it doing to Christianity when these stories are coming in? Are we changing what we believe? Or is Christ's story what continues to form our identity? Because my story, personally, as a human, does matter, but only insofar as it is in the vine, right? Insofar as I am a branch on the vine being fed by him. And from there, my knowledge of his story, not as a story about how there's a hero quest, but as a man who died and rose again, who is my king. Mm-hmm. Now my story has meaning. No matter what happens, he's my king.
Yeah.
I can be the most helpless, useless person in the whole world, but he's my king, and I have meaning then, right? That's just a little more than like, yeah, Luke Skywalker's a Christ figure. Like it's from the history of the resurrected kingdom that then my story isn't just me trying to tell myself I have a story. Mm-hmm. It is in fact the story of Jesus Christ entering, redeeming, claiming, and then enlivening my story. Paganism is the same kind of thing, only without any actual God.
Yeah. So it made me kind of think about, like, as I was reading the point behind, or I guess it's not really the point behind why we should have stories, but it's more like, what's the benefit of stories?
I want to go back even further for half a sec. This is like behind your question. Like, we were just talking like in meta terms, big stories, okay, big overarching stories. But every day of our lives, every moment of our lives are stories we are telling ourselves. Mm-hmm. I am going to the store. Well, that's a story until you get there, right? And so if you pair that back even further and you study the development of language itself, you call this thing because it does this stuff. And the old words that were pictographs, drew the story of the thing to relate to the sound that then became the meaning of the word. So even words, a single word at least arises in history as a story. We cannot talk without telling stories. So if you want to ask, what is story about? It's really what is talking about. Why do we have a voice? Why do we have a tongue? And indeed, to praise Jesus Christ, right? To praise our God for his story. But then in this sense, for my question, wrestling with what's the value of stories, the answer to some extent is that's a dumb question, because you can't escape stories. What about fictional stories? Well, if I say I'm going to the store, I just told a fictional story until I go to the store. Mm-hmm. I did. I told it's a fictional story that may come true. I guess you could call it a prophecy if you want, right? Is fiction false prophecy? Are movies false prophecy? That's an interesting question. It all revolves around in what do you understand language to be capable of and doing. And at its root, language is telling a story. Then you're wrestling with, so this article says that of all the stories that are told, Christ's story makes the most sense of all of them. And that is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And
well,
what
right, like Christ is at the heart of the classical hero.
Mm-hmm.
That he is the model.
He's not the model for Odysseus, though. Odysseus is not driven from Christianity directly, and in that sense, the kind of divine-like heroes of old very much are reflections of whatever they arose in. But what is true is that Odysseus couldn't be who he is without stealing from an older myth that ultimately was of Christ, right? An older prophecy of Christ. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we can say that everybody was just, I don't know. Say what you said again, though. Something about the way it was said, I wanted to quibble with it, I guess.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter then.
I don't know what you are asking me to say again.
Well, it was about the I don't want to give too much credit to non-Christian ancient resources.
I see.
Plato, Cicero, any of those guys, all of whom developed incredible wisdom. And if you come to the Hebrew and Collegium here at Lakeside Hills and Hull, you'll have a chance to read these guys. So I'm not saying like never talk about it. What I am saying is that rather than spend a lot of time trying to see how you can redeem the Odyssey by seeing that it does ultimately point to Christ because the best of it must borrow from Christ, why don't you just go to the story of Christ first? Why are we wanting to tell these other stories that are ultimately metaphors and parables? Why are we borrowing the parables of those who do not concur with our worldview? And yeah, sure, you study your enemy. Again, these books are available as resources to know the context of history here at Hebrew and Collegium, but I don't want to try too hard to redeem the pagan art. Right. That's what I'm getting to.
And so the point of that article
mm-hmm.
was there were two different ones that kind of went with the same theme, but the point of that article is that the pagan has this model for a classical hero, and the author was saying Christ is the fulfillment of what the pagans are seeking.
Absolutely.
And so you're right. Absolutely. Your concept of like, why go to a pagan story to find
mm-hmm.
Christ? No,
mm-hmm.
you can just go to Christ
mm-hmm.
and you'll find the fulfillment of all that we desire and seek. So then as we go ahead.
It's that, so if you go to the pagan story and you find your Christianity is able to find Christ in the pagan story, that's like an apologetic moment. Okay. So you're like defending at that point. You're not really feeding. I'm not really growing in my Christian faith because Gandalf comes back from the dead.
Right.
I'm able to have my Christian faith tell me why this is a good thing. Why this story is not telling me about evil things right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that I'm going to find, we start about meaning. Like the article says, you will find meaning in stories.
Yeah,
okay?
The other article, yes, is talking about that.
Rather than trying to find meaning in stories, since there is only one story,
mm-hmm.
find how you exist in that story. Right. So it really is first your story, but that's just because that's how you experience life. It's your story of your life as it is an extension of the life of Jesus Christ into which you are baptized. That narrative, that tale, that legend, that myth, that history, that parable, it's all this and more. That real thing, the kingdom that has come by word and spirit. Yeah, this will drive meaning forward into your life so that when you do, you won't even need the other stories, but you won't mind them either, but you won't need them the way that we just seem to need them so much these days for hope. How will I ever have a good weekend if I can't sit back and be entertained by a story? Well, golly, are you a starving person? You poor soul. The confidence that's available to you as an extension of Jesus Christ in the present moment means you don't need to sit back and check out of anything ever. Mm-hmm. And so I love, it's everything that I love and hate about classical thinking is it's like it's right, but it's trying to redeem the pagan works, and that's fine, but it's not going to give you the meaning you think. Trying to chase a meaningful life by seeing hero quests in Ender's Game and Dune and Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and believing that Christ is the real hero, but I'm still going to let these other stories be how I think of manhood and existence and day and life and time. They form my identity. It didn't give me great meaning ever, ever. But, just the idea that the kingdom remains, regardless of what you see right now. The kingdom is rocking it right now, and I'm in the kingdom. I'll tell you what, that's a story I'll sink my teeth into, and my heart and soul jump and leap for joy. And I've lived enough life without joy, honestly, to be really, really grateful for discovering praying the Psalms, because that's where it came from. I tell you, It really is. So yeah, I love it, and yet I'm like, ugh, because it's just this same thing where we're diagnosing the problem, but then we're trying to use the solution to like build up a tertiary thing. And I guess I'm so convinced that we're in a time of battle where, you know what, if Plato falls into the ashes of history and we never have him again, I don't care as long as we got the Bible at the other side of this thing. Right.
Well,
and there's just I don't know, there's a fragility to this.
I think that's kind of why I was combining the two articles instead of just taking one article and then taking another article and not melding them. Because if you apply the what's happening to me psychologically as I read stories to my scripture reading, then you can see how it's impacting you.
Yes, true.
And it also will help to lead you to be a little more selective as to which stories you put in.
Yeah.
Because, like, one of the points was that, I need to find that my life has meaning. As a human, that's driving us. And there, according to this article's author, there are two ways that you can do that. You can find meaning for your life through your relationship with your parents.
A story, but yes.
And through literature. Specifically, something where the person goes through a struggle that's a severe trial and then overcomes. So like fairy tale or hero story.
It's more than that, though.
But scripture has true hero tales.
Yeah. Can I summarize what you just said a little bit and contextualize it? So, like you just said, there are two ways that we, as humans, according to the article, experience the growth of our individual stories. One is through the father's identity. Not to dismiss the mothers, you matter too. But golly, can we move on now? Like, get past that in history. The father's identity is going all the way back to Adam, going all the way back to the Father in heaven, right?
Well, exactly.
The father's identity.
The head of the house, even if we don't recognize him as the head of the house, he's going to have the most influence.
You are his story.
Right. So, I mean, we can take this out of the human to human relationship and just apply it to our dog, master dog. Like, until the head of the pack, which in our home was you, developed a stable relationship with our dog, he was unstable.
Yeah, right.
No matter how much time and energy I devoted to it.
It's the patriarch principle again, which is really cool. So the father's identity, which is unavoidable and sometimes a curse, usually in one way or another, a curse, in fact. And then the other way, which, again, it limited it just to like fiction stories, like the confessions of men. So you have who your father is, and you have what men say. And right. And those confessions of men, when they are valuable, St. Augustine, are about overcoming a trauma and a trial, right? It's the hero quest. St. Augustine's confessions, a hero quest. But it's not a hero quest. It isn't really. So limiting it to the hero quest, I think, diminishes it, is kind of the thing. what's helpful also here is something out of apologetics and understanding how worldviews work. So worldview is a term that gets a lot of use and really is watered down a bit to mean good and bad things at this point. But, the way it was used initially in apologetics is just to recognize that every single human being is always asking, who am I? Mm-hmm. What's my problem? And how do I fix it? And that is your worldview. You have big answers, you got little answers, right? You're doing this all the time with every step of your day, and you have the meta, the big one that's carrying you. And so, who am I? Father's son, right? Or who men say I am. Those two things, right? What's my problem? And my father's identity, right? And what men say of him. Actually, that's my problem too, sin, right? And then how do I fix it? Well, my father's identity. He sent his son, right? And then what is the confession of men, right? The word of God that is among us. So this is really cool. It's like core stuff. I mean, I even call this scientific because it's the categories are substantial and kind of capture everything. That's really neat.
Yeah. So that was one thing or two things that I melded together in my meditatio this week. Then the other thing that I did was I explored your brief history of power.
Oh, you got involved in the BHOP. Do you BHOP?
Normally, regularly?
No, that's just
that's
something I'm trying to start saying that sometimes.
Oh, that's cute.
Do you? Brief history of power?
Nice.
Do you? Yeah.
So I checked out episode number 130. Pretty hot topic these days.
Yeah.
But some of the
controversy.
Yeah. Some of the things that I pulled out, which have helped me just in other areas of my life, were that something you guys said was, where there are young men who care, there will be zealous young men.
Correct.
And I think oftentimes, and I don't know that this is feminism as much as matriarchy. Is it matriarchy or
matrilinealism?
Matrilinealism. That's the word I'm looking for. That was the M one. So matrilinealism has created this fear of the zealous young man. And so oftentimes when we see a zealous young man, we want to silence them or cage them so that they don't do harm to themselves or others.
Or others, yeah, which is a real thing too.
And yet, if we apply what we learn from the psychology in Wild Thing about raising or nurturing the heart of boy, you can see that in order for a boy to become a great man, he has to fail and then pick himself up and succeed, knowing that he has, you've got his back as far as you are standing there supporting him, not saying, yay, you're doing the right thing, but that you are, that you believe in him, even if he fails. So if we apply that knowledge to this tendency that we have to want to silence the zealous young man, we'll see that the harm that we're doing. You know? And so the question is, how do we support the zealous young man? How do we create kind of this bumper system so that he can zing all over the place and do the learning and the growing and the developing that he needs to do to become the great man that God has intended for him to be, without creating too much chaos in his wake?
Well, I mean, that's in theory what the Hebrew Collegium is, an experiment in trying to provide guys in a year, is a place to go and I guess break a few things. And we found that indeed has been the case.
It's wild. Yeah. It's wild what young men can break.
It is. It is. So, but in terms of, so I want to say we're trying to experimentally answer that question as you ask it. And I don't think that the idea is bad. Doesn't mean it's going to succeed here, but we're praying for that. But the idea itself of young men need to leave the nest to quest, in which they have to keep going. And if they don't do that, then instead they're going to like break things in the house, and I don't mean like dishes. I mean, over time that questing aggression is going to come out in other ways. Mm-hmm. It's like the dog. Like the first thing the dog trainer said to us was, "Is your dog misbehaving? Have you walked him 3 hours today?" Wait, what? Yeah, 3 hours. You walk your dog 3 hours a day, your dog will behave just fine. I mean, yeah, he's asleep most of the time is what he's going to do. And there's some genius there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So for young men to have the place to go and explode with their energies of adventure and creativity, they need to attach to other male role models who will be their heroes along. Again, we have the father's identity, and then you have the confessions of men, right? So who are the men they attach to? Who do they hear willingly, mm-hmm. right? But in terms of how you would do that, like in home, I don't know. I mean, you got to start young with the boys and let the boys get hurt.
Well, I think that, I guess, where I have been, where I found this quote to be helpful is a reminder, instead of getting upset when I've run into a zealous young man, or his zeal kind of ruffles my feathers, I can thank God that he cares.
Yeah,
because
amen.
It's a sign that he cares.
Yeah.
And so it's transforming the way that I interact with something that is unavoidable, essentially.
Yes.
I mean, it is avoidable if we just take their care away, which is mm-hmm. what the past 20, 30 years mm-hmm. has tried to do. Mm-hmm. And that has created some very slothful and uncaring or just yep. apathetic people.
Yep.
And I don't think that as a continuing society, that's not something that we would really desire.
It's going to cause things to burn. I mean, really, things are going to collapse. We're not going to be able to maintain things.
Yeah.
It's already the case.
So to take it as a sign that he cares is, yeah. I mean, it's just
thank
a way
God
to
for young men who care.
My brain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that as iron sharpens iron. And so the young men need to bang their heads off each other and off older men who will respond with more maturity so that they can reflect that gradually in time. And again, a father who's done his job will have prepared a young man for much of this. And a father who's not done his job, then the young man's going to be struggling to find his new mentor. He's going to chase and chase and chase and try to find a father figure first, because that's like mm-hmm. the most important one, right? So, yeah. Thank God for the zeal of young men. It is, and especially when that zeal is zeal for the house of Jesus Christ. And I think you can know that, I mean, it's not like every person is a guaranteed path, but you can know that, patience with the zeal that is tempered by a desire to channel the zeal. Like, you don't ignore stupid zeal, just let it happen. You confront it, mm-hmm. but patience with it over time will turn that zeal into strength, really. A stable, subtle, consistent strength.
Well, and Proverbs promises us that the glory of a young man is his strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can know that this is here for a reason, mm-hmm. and trust that God's using it for his glory in the end.
Yeah.
The other thing that popped out at me in this Brief History of Power episode was a definition for a word that you hear a lot. But as you seek, Jonathan, to find biblical terms for words that become popular in secular mm-hmm. speech, this was what was defined. Racism in biblical terms is hate or partiality. And I think that helps us so much to recognize what's being spoken of, so that when we are labeled that with that term of racist, we can check ourselves and be like, okay, am I actually acting with hate or partiality? And that will help us to avoid unnecessary quibbles or arguments, or, you know, because you can either recognize it for its somebody who is, I'm losing the term, it's like ignorance. You can recognize it for its ignorance. Or you can ask yourself, like, is this real? Am I really, does this need to be something that I check myself with? So that, I appreciated that. And then the other thing that was brought up was that pragmatism is an American ideology. And I had gone to, so this idea of pragmatism is something that recently has come across my plate a few times, and I'd never really stopped and thought about it. But because it keeps coming up in things that I'm coming into contact with, I went to dive deeper into it. And there was an article that was written that that deals with the pragmatic thought, and it takes the Aesop's fable of the grasshopper and the ant, where the grasshopper during the summer and the fall, instead of preparing for winter and gathering and harvesting and preparing in any way he can, he plays his music and dances. And oftentimes he's labeled as lazy or myopic. And then once winter comes, he starves as the consequence of his actions. And then the ant, on the other hand, is lauded for his industriousness, his conscientiousness. He works hard to prepare for something that's coming, and then is rewarded by being well fed and warm during the winter. But then he won't share either. He's like, no, you have to, grasshopper, I'm not going to have mercy on you. You have to reap what you sowed, which was nothing. And so so the article is actually pointing out that perhaps, if you look at the grasshopper's life, so a grasshopper is born in spring, and then actually their lifespan only goes until late fall. They don't winter over. So they naturally die in the fall. So like the idea is that the grasshopper didn't need to prepare for something that he wasn't going to participate in, but instead he's making the most of his day and living by faith, and sharing the joy of his song with those who do have to prepare for winter. So that's their concept. And it really rubbed me wrong. Like, I read this article 3 times because it rubbed me wrong the first time. And I was like, I just don't see how we can suddenly, in our 21st century thinking, like, turn this fable that has taught us to be industrious and work hard and prepare upside down and say, no, the grasshopper's right.
Well, I don't know if, okay, so maybe that's what the article's saying, and it's all about the grasshopper being right, but the trying to impute walking and living by faith into Aesop's fables is the very thing I was complaining about a few moments ago. It's not a Christian story. It's a story of wisdom, sure.
Right.
But its meaning can never be walking by faith, because it doesn't have that as a teaching. But the primary point, that our understanding of the story of the grasshopper and the ant is driven by our assumptions about what is good and what is bad. And so that we see in the ant industriousness, and we see in the grasshopper laziness, is a pretty profound insight. and the possibility that maybe the story means you're supposed to be like both of these at different times. You're supposed to see the wisdom of them in their own space. And so if you know there's nothing you can do, then why worry about it? But if you know there's something you can do, then you got to worry about it. And that, as the meaning of that fable, is quite genius, actually, because instead of just claiming there's only one ideology that's right, it declares that life is contextualized, that there are times and places where you're going to have to do one thing or another. And what? This calls for wisdom. Right? You can't have a bullet point list. Was I pragmatic today? Then I'm a good person. Right? It just doesn't work that way. So I like that. I don't really like the grasshopper is the right way. If that's really where it ends on the other side of it, now you're just falling off the horse on the other side. And to try to make it about living by faith, certainly the Christian, if there's nothing you can do, so you're not going to worry about it. I mean, praying about it, and then living by faith is what you're going to do. But I don't know that that's what Aesop was teaching. Now, I'm pretty sure Aesop's Greek, right? Now, I could be wrong about this. But I don't think Aesop was a Christian.
I don't know.
I don't think he was.
I always thought that he was, just because it was so close to
then maybe I'm wrong.
Illustrating the Ten Commandments.
Oh, golly. Let's look it up.
And
someone in the comments will say it before I can even bother to look it up. Keep talking.
Well, so in this article, it talks about how the modern American values hard work to prepare for the future. And this would then lead us to a pragmatic worldview. And this is why that whole point was why I was
620 BC.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Greek. So it's just not going to teach you faith. It's not going to teach you Christian faith.
No.
And if you come away from Aesop's Fable saying, "Oh, that was about Christian faith," it's like, well, again, stay salty, my friends. It's fine. You can take the story and make it mean your meaning. Why are we so insistent that the goal of Christian education is to find meaning in the pagan stories? That's my question. Right? Why is that so imperative to us right now at this juncture in history?
Well, and oftentimes in the classical teaching model, they do turn to the fables for wisdom, rather than focusing on the Proverbs. Like, we don't often have our kids just read through Proverbs over and over again. We actually go to Aesop's fables for the morality, because, quote unquote, the moral of the story is always written at the end. Yeah. And the moral of the ant and the grasshopper is, like, you will reap what you sow. Right. Work hard while it is day.
Right.
And so,
does it say that in the text?
I don't. The moral of the story is often written, depending on who translated it.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering if
it'll be phrased one way or versus another. But you can go ahead and look it up.
No, I don't want to try right now. It's too much to think about.
So, anyway, the fact that modern American thought processes are driven by a pragmatic worldview.
For sure.
And here, the ant was labeled as the pragmatic one.
Yep.
And then we were shown through, walked through the article why the ant was not the one, not the hero, not the one that we want to be like. And then in your brief history of power, the pragmatism was also pointed at as being a negative thing.
It's not negative just across the board, but as an ideological religious stance, as the way of viewing all things through, is it pragmatic or not? Does it work or not? Does it serve me or not? Is it good for me or not? It's not super helpful. But like, if you're trying to fix your TV, you want to be pragmatic. Your TV is not going to work. And I shouldn't use TV as an example. You want to try to fix your desk. The leg fell off. Pragmatism is a way of going at it that seeks the solution, believing that there will be solutions for those who study the problem. And that's not bad. And also to believe there's more than one way to solve a problem, but that the most efficient way is going to be the most efficient way. That's not bad either, unless it's your only driving meta. If this is your only driving story is, efficiency and productivity and pragmatism. Yeah, it's a pretty works-based religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
And so the the converse was like, what does a classical Christian look like?
Yeah, I don't know.
So if the pragmatist is driven by fear but not faith, and then assumes that the future can be predicted or planned for,
That's interesting, yeah.
and therefore is led to prepare for seasons or destinations that weren't even meant for them. What is a Christian? Let's not even call them classical. Let's just call them Christian. What should our ideology be? And the idea is that we should exalt or that we do. As Christians, we exalt humility and self-sacrifice rather than what you were saying, like the me focus. How can I serve me so that me gets bigger and better? The Christian seeks values that focus on God's truth and reliability rather than I will be prepared for whatever comes. And you get this a lot in Brief History of Power. Dr. Kuntz is excellent at pointing at, like, you know what? How do we prepare for tomorrow? Well, we take tomorrow as we can, as it comes. We thank God for the electricity, the heat, whatever it is that we have today, and we just move forward. And then the Christian is journeying towards what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. And that's where the classical comes in, because that
and true and good and beautiful is fine. And Paul says, if anything is true and good and beautiful, laud such things. So I'm not saying we shouldn't laud the classics. I just think we've misappropriated how important they are.
And I agree. And that's why I was like, if reading does have this psychological impact on me, the way that these scholars are saying, who were quoted in this article, then I want to be careful what I read, because if it's going to help give me purpose for my life, then I definitely want to have that purpose be something that will keep me focused on the values of God,
I see. So it's not if it's going to give you purpose, but because it's going to give you purpose in your life when you read this thing, and you're not so strong as to just always turn off whatever purposes it gives you, you might not want to just go imbibing everything you think sounds like a good story or a good title.
Right. And this brings us full circle back to my little stay salty. Like, I sat there just because it was in print and tried to justify it, and I didn't get to the conclusion. You immediately were like, oh, well, Christ says salt and light. Yeah. Like, I did not. And so I was like, well, I mean, I guess coastal living is
awesome.
good.
I like that one too, though.
But is coastal living good?
Surfing is awesome.
I don't know.
Living with the salt on your scent. There's nothing wrong. Hold on, I gotta back up. Look. Right now, at this time in history, living in the saltwater areas, you're gonna have higher condensation of paganism. Do they condensate? Apparently they condensate. Higher concentrations of paganism. So that's all true. But please, that has nothing to do with the salt smell in the air, which is a beautiful, wonderful thing. And anyone who gets a chance to smell the salt smell in the air off of the coast, especially in San Diego or Santa Cruz, like oh my goodness, stay salty. It's beautiful. It's calm. Yeah. It's quiet. The seagulls, the waves, the yoga. It's
oh, Christ have mercy. Yeah. So. Well, and that's the one thing, like recently we've been talking about how the sea was seen by, in the Hebrew mind, was seen as the place of the devil.
Yeah, Poseidon's realm.
And so it's like, wow, it's no wonder there's paganism there as heavily as there is.
Well, so trees, mountains, and water.
Yeah.
And that's not just ancient Phoenicia. I mean, that's Hinduism, that's ancient China, it's Shinto. Where they have their shrines in Shinto, it's going to be trees, mountains, and water.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think why?
It's harder to live in the mountains, though, and so that's why I think you see a little bit more of a there's a prospering of humanity on coastal lands.
Well, we need water to live.
Yeah.
So And rare is the desert that's right off the ocean, and people don't live there unless they pump water in. And so, coastal living provides certain fishing and things like that. Or water is huge. You cannot settle without water. Mm-hmm. We are so spoiled right now. I mean, the ice storm last week really showed it too, right? You need that water. And we had people who lost power, and well water is unavailable for a couple of days, etc. Mm-hmm. But in the ancient world, more than now, though, I mean, you lived near a river, you lived near a stream or a well, a big, deep one. We got buckets pulling stuff out of it because you just need it. So it's a big part of life, and trees are a big part of life too. Mm-hmm. But mountains, as you point out, are not exactly like everywhere and always. But what I want to kind of point out is that these three places where pagan religion tends to congregate, trees, mountains, water, are things that the Bible also says are what Christianity is about. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's so many levels from Mount Sinai to Mount Calvary to Mount Zion, right? From the tree of life to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to the tree of the cross to the tree of life again, right? From the Spirit over the waters to the worldwide flood to baptismal regeneration and the water of everlasting life that will flow from the stream by the throne, right?
Yeah.
So this is where there's only one story and they're just borrowing from it. It really does lie in. And yet I think the reason isn't just because Christianity says so. Christianity says trees, mountains, and water are important because God made them important for mankind. It's nature. It's natural reality, natural philosophy, or science, if you want to call it that. And so what paganism is then is a religification of science generally. And ancient paganism had less tools to be like accurate with their science, but it's what they thought of, or the way we treat science is the way they treated religion. And then again, these holy places, the tree, there's going to be life around a tree. It's a gathering place for animals and birds, and humans gather under trees. So it's just a natural thing to get together under. And mountains, everyone gets a mountaintop experience, and they find it's powerful when you get up there if you do the work to get up a mountain. And of course, you get a shrine on the top of the mountain with some monk sitting in it. Yeah, it looks really spiritual then. And again, rivers particularly, one of the primary function points of Hinduism is the Indus River. It is a holy river to them. The Jordan was a holy river. Even the baptism of Naaman, he seems to imply that back in Damascus, his river was a holy river. So they ascribe powers to these things. And to see that as just part of what we do, I think is really, really valuable. Now, we pulled this out of what you were talking about, though. So I want to go back to that if we can. If we can't, that's fine. But ascribing power to things, that was what it was about. And pagan development. Mm-hmm. But it was coming out of your story stuff and reading stuff somehow. No.
Yeah.
That's right.
I don't know.
That's okay. Trees, mountains, and water are archetypes of religion that will show you where the paganism is happening, which salt life is what it came out of. Show you the paganism, where it's happening. And, I mean, look around. Where are people gathering around water? Where are they gathering around mountains? Where are they gathering around trees? What are they doing when they do this? Look with new eyes. You'll be surprised what you find. And then remember that this truly has been redeemed. Odysseus, the story, I mean, redeem it if you can. But it truly has been redeemed. That when you come to the congregation and you go to that altar there to receive the body and blood of Jesus Christ, Jesus is a foretaste of the kingdom of heaven, which is Mount Zion. Right? So the mountain is there. And there's going to be a cross in that building. There's going to be a tree in that building. Right? And then water. The font is going to be there. Right? It might not have water in it, but the font's going to be there. And so we have our own version of this that is our religion. And so this did come out of our saltwater
it did.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember how it connected back to the stories, though. And I was saying that because it was in print, it impacted me and made me want to justify it.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, your point is that words on your wall change you, whether you like it or not. So maybe put good words on your wall, and inscribe your gates, right? Write it on the door lintels of your house. Yeah. And we're at a point where it's not just, hey, should we write some stuff on our house? It's what's been written on our house.
Yeah.
What have we been reading all this time? Maybe we should erase that part and not let it tell me what to think all the time. That reminds me of something. So going to be a change in topic a little bit. But I've been, again, reckoning with my archive system and feeling pretty good about all that. But I got one deck of cards, big, thick thing. That I don't know that I've ever really gone back and gone through this. So this is probably a 2.5-year-old stack of stuff that's just gotten shoved in there. And it started as a stack. I remember somehow, and this is 2020 summer or even 2021 spring. So we weren't communicating as good as we could have been at that point in our life. And there was a card that I had written something just like the phrase, the story of trauma on it. And you said, what does that mean to you? And at the moment, there was a lot of different things that exploded in my head at that point. Emotionally, it was a very stunning question. But the result of that question was that I just started putting in this pile anything that could be related to a note about what does the fact that I feel traumatized mean to me. And of all the stuff that I've gone through, I've gone through all my notes. I've gone through everything. I love my system. That pile has not been touched. It's sitting in the closet on a secondary kind of desk space, and I began to open it up a little bit, and then I got this question. I shared this with you. It was like, part of me just wants to take the whole thing, throw it away.
Yeah.
Never look at it again. But part of me thinks there's some real gold in there. But I know there's some real gold in there. And so I've been going back and forth on that. Which of those two things do I do? Do I just throw the gold away? Because I could. Like, just because there's gold doesn't mean you have to keep it, right? This is the freedom of Christianity, by the way.
Well, right. And it's inside of you.
Yeah.
It's not like just because you wrote it down, it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's there. And
but
it's being refined.
If I go through
each
it
day
and let each one be read one more time and then throw it out at that point, there's going to be this is sort of what I'm getting to, is that before making a decision about what I would do, I hit my head standing up on the bottom of the desk and knocked a good portion of the cards
helter-skelter
onto the ground, which was okay because I've learned to embrace that those moments when my cards spill, and it doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, I try to step back and I look for like the first 3 cards I see that stick out, and I pull them out, I set them aside, and I think about it. So because there's usually something good that I wouldn't have come up with. It's just sitting right there in front of me. And sort of that's what happened again. So there's like the helter-kelter spill. I picked up one card and I walked out of the closet and looked at it, and golly, is it a painful memory. Golly, is it a painful memory. Single memory.
Is it the one that's on your desk?
It is. Did you read it?
I did.
Oh my goodness.
That's terrible.
It hurt. 16 or 17.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Golly, it hurt. So, trauma. Sharing things, coming to terms with things. I don't know. I wasn't sure whether I would want to actually share that with you, but now that you've read it, that I don't know. To protect persons and people's and I don't want to share with everyone out there exactly what it was, but it was something that said to me by a very close relation that implied deep psychological evil of me.
Yeah.
Basically, or at least brokenness beyond repair, which had never actually been diagnosed at all. So, and of course, I do have, I think, CPTSD, so that is a thing. But the pain of that memory, and then what I really want to do now is like, okay, I can acknowledge that hurt so much, and now I can throw that card away.
Yeah.
And I don't ever have to remember that again. I don't. And if I do, it won't hurt the same way it does now. So that's kind of what I want to do with that stack still, is let that happen. Because I just feel like I just got to let go. And part of letting go is going to be like knowing what I'm letting go of. I don't know. And I'm not sure why I brought that up. I mean, I know that was there for me to possibly share today, and it seemed like a good place to share it. But
I ran across a quote as I was reading to our youngest, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Mm-hmm.
I ran across a little section, I guess, because it's a back and forth between Frodo and Gandalf, and it kind of ties that up a little bit. It says, always after a defeat, says Gandalf, and a respite, the shadows take another shape and grows again. I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide.
Mm-hmm.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good book.
So, yeah, I mean, it's facing the past, facing the fear of, what does that mean for me now? Is it going to come again? It's real.
Mm-hmm.
And rightly so, it's terrifying, but today that person, is far away.
Mm-hmm.
And today that person hasn't spoken those words to you.
No.
And
no.
Because of the survival that you have experienced, you are able to do today far greater than what you would have done if you hadn't had to survive.
Well, I hope so. I had a member tell me once when I was sharing a little bit about CPTSD, not a lot, but just kind of briefly talking about it. And he said, puppy, make some noise. Oh, what's going on? Oh, you're going to make me put on the Aurelius cam now. They have to see you since you're doing this. Oh, no. See his little face down there in the corner? Barely.
Not really. I can't get my skirt out of the way enough.
Boy, you good puppy. There he goes. Barking it. Now I got to do all the work to get this back. And do you remember?
You were talking about a member saying something to you about CPTSD.
He said, yeah, and that's why you preach the way you do. And so we all are thankful for it. That's what he said. And that was kind of one of those gut checks where it's like, okay, Jesus, fine. Yeah. If that's what it took, if there was no other way.
He's okay.
Is he okay?
Yeah, he just was kind of, we have activity upstairs, so he's
a little trying to figure out what's going on. Rubbing that there. So, hey, we probably could jump into these questions. That we got for you. Actually, well, I had a couple other announcements I guess were out there. If you haven't heard yet, if you get Mad Mondays, you know about this, but I'll be speaking this upcoming April 13th through 16th, although I'll only be there 13th through the 15th, I believe, at the men's gathering. If you Google men's gathering, guess what shows up? This. You would think there'd be more. But nope, the men's gathering. It's in Lakeview Villages, Seymour, Indiana. And the topic, Stop the White Noise. By and large, I will be talking about Psalms, Proverbs, and indeed my own views on the use of media, information technologies, and discernment as Christians in the present time, which it means using it less than you probably do. But if you'd like to come fellowship with a bunch of other Christian men, they got a great set of events at the campsite there, including looking forward to going to the shooting range and firing some weapons at targets and stuff on Friday morning. We will be there April 13th through 15th, and you can sign up for this at mensgathering.us. I don't know. These are my two thoughts for this week, and I do want to throw them out there as a matter of public record. Not that they're that big a deal, but they're just little theological thoughts. I discovered that Job 33 is just about one of the coolest chapters in the Bible this week. I just can't believe how Christological it is. I don't know how I read it before and didn't ever get blown away by it. You know, have those moments where you're like, I know I've read this before, but I never saw that.
Yeah.
Golly. So, and there's a lot there, and I plan to spend some time studying it. I plan to read Job 33 every day, not legalistically, for a good 2 or 3 weeks here. I'm just going to do it to really grapple with it a bit. But I just want to call attention to verses 29 and 30, which says, Behold, God works all these things twice, in fact 3 times with a man, to bring back his soul from the pit, that he may be enlightened with the grace of life. Now, all these things he works is the Christological resurrection of Jesus Christ that is basically said in poetic language, prophetic language, up to this point in the chapter. So he works all these things twice, in fact 3 times with the man, to bring him back his soul from the pit, that he may be enlightened with the light of life. All I want to say is that if you're in that argument with somebody who's asking you for a Bible verse about the guys who don't get a chance to believe in Jesus, I'd be like, this verse seems to imply they got at least 3 chances. What? No one ever came and talked? I don't know. God works all these things twice, in fact 3 times with the man. Like, is that really the meaning of the verse? I don't know. And that's why I'm just public record. Argue that. Dig into that. But it seems to me this implies everyone gets a chance. Or at least let's say it this way, God is never impartial. God is not unfair. Not at all. He's striving to bring back a man's soul from the pit. And after 2 or 3 chances, the generations have 3 or 4 generations of no more chances until the word comes back again. Well, I mean, that's that. It doesn't change this from meaning that God is giving everybody salvation. He's giving it to them. And it is we who resist this and make it not happen. So that's one. The second thing is just this idea. I was thinking about the argument for annihilationism. And I actually had someone on YouTube come on me with a comment maybe a month and a half ago about the teaching about hell and insisting that no, there is no hell, there is only annihilation. And this is something Jehovah's Witnesses teach, but a number of Protestant groups will also teach, which is that hell is mean.
Right.
And so there's an end to it. Right. Some teach the annihilation is right away. So the devil, all his angels, and the sinful world that are not in Jesus, Judgment Day, they just are vaporized, just gone into the nothing. And then others will teach that it's more like, there's fire for a while, like punishment for a while, but then eventually God has mercy on them and snuffs them out. His mercy is to make them not exist, which is interesting.
Okay.
All right. So the thought that I had this week is Satan wishes he could be annihilated. Like, he would love that. Like, that's actually his game. His whole game is annihilation. Like, from the start, his goal is destruction. He wants to be annihilated. Hell means he has to be in the presence of God the rest of eternity. He doesn't like that at all.
Yeah.
He doesn't want that. He wants you. He wants freedom. He wants nothing. He wants destruction, right? He wishes he could be annihilated. True just punishment on him for what he's done means, no, you don't get to actually win. Like, to annihilate the devil is for him to win. And if you teach annihilationism, you actually are really holding a diabolical idea. It doesn't mean you're not a Christian, but the devil wants you to hold that idea, which is that, yeah, he's going to win in one way. God couldn't actually fix it. He had to destroy him. No, hell means God fixed it. Even the devil. No. As much as he can be fixed as a sign, a memorial to all history, right? The smoke over fire goes up forever and ever, and they sing hallelujah, and so forth. So anyway, that's just that. Satan wishes he could be annihilated.
So if I believed or taught about annihilation, then how would I justify the story of Lazarus and Abraham?
Well, you could call it a parable.
But what's happening then in that scenario?
Mm-hmm. Well, in Judgment Day hasn't come.
Okay.
Either. Right.
Okay.
So we're talking about like the last day and then the final verdict, not the thing people go to now. No. That's a good thought, though. if after death is just annihilation. Yeah. Which, who teaches that? So there are those who teach, it's called soul sleep. It's a different idea. Is that when you die, you cease to exist, but then God will raise your soul on the last day as well. So there's sort of a non-existence until the last day. And yeah, Lazarus is a good question on that one. But I think they might say something like, oh, it's a parable, it's a story. There wasn't actually, a guy sowing seed on the road,
Right.
So, but then the argument against that is, but Lazarus is a name. That's a real name. Are you sure it's a parable? And then the scholars quibble over that. So I don't know if it fixes it entirely, but I think to reject, and that's why my point is, like, if you believe in annihilationism, you're letting the devil get his way. That's what he wants. He wants to annihilate himself and you with him. And God's not going to let that happen. And I think that is a really driving notion. It holds value across multiple biblical passages. So, our first question from y'all out there, I have not yet thrown up. Well, actually, I threw up last night, didn't I? My stuff. Let's see here. Can you see?
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I was wondering if you maybe went into anaphylactic shock.
Maybe. I doubt it was that much.
Well, you have a hive on your forehead this morning.
Do I still?
That's what made me think about it.
Still?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No, that's a pimple.
Oh, for real?
For real.
Oh, it looks like a hive.
Thank you for calling attention to the pimple nobody could see on my face on YouTube. It's a big one. It's kind of painful.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. RevFisk, you're right. Over the years, and particularly in the last few, I've thought about becoming a pastor. The problem is that I do not think I am biblically qualified to be one. Do the passages in 1 Timothy and Titus about the overseer having only one wife have to do with polygamy, or do they have to do with divorce and promiscuity as well? Without getting into the details, this is a family show. I have violated the sixth commandment many times in my life. I have since repented and have been married to my current second wife for 9 years, and we have 3 children. An outsider looking at my life without knowing my past would probably consider me to be eligible for the ministry from a biblical standpoint. That said, I don't want to simply please men, but rather to please God. Even if I am eligible, I realize that other practical factors may keep me out of the ministry, and so I am also content to be and remain a layman. Since this has been on my mind time and again, I just want to know if I have the option. Thank you, and again, bless you, Michael. So, just out of that, my advice about whether a man should be a pastor is, if you cannot be a pastor, don't even begin to do it with like 75%, 85%, 90% heart. No. You go because you can't stand the idea of anything else. You can't not. And then when they tell you you're not allowed to, then you really got a crisis of faith. You got to learn how to live as a layman. But for the majority, though, that's kind of the thing that's most needed for success in the ministry. I don't mean by success like big numbers and money and stuff like that. I just mean that you actually retire as a pastor, late in life, as opposed to wash out in the first couple of years. It's like 30%. I mean, it's like this huge number. So, after all this time, you move your family to the middle of nowhere. Well, St. Louis, I guess. You got 4 years of debt after giving up your job. You're never going to have the house and the 3 cars like you used to have, and the boat and the vacations to Florida and all. It's not going to happen. And you get out there, and 3 years in, you're about to be bankrupt, and you can't even take it anymore because you just thought it was something different than what it is. And that's really, really the most important thing, right? So when you go. Put your hand to the plow. Don't look back. Like you're going to die doing this. Right? And that would be my first piece there. Secondarily, though, on the issue of your fitness for the office, the text you're referring to, Titus and 1 Timothy 3, we're just looking at 1 Timothy 3 here. This is a faithful saying. Paul says, if a man desires the position of it's episkopes in the Greek. You can hear Episcopalian church there. So they're clearly the true church on earth because Paul says that they're. No, that's not what that means.
Oh, are you being salty?
I'm being salty. But episkopes means overseer. And so here it's translated as bishop because you know what bishop means? It means overseer. So the office of the pastor here in 1 Timothy is called the office of the overseer, the one who watches over what? The flock? Yeah, like a shepherd would do. Whoever desires this office, he desires a good work, right? So the first thing is, the moment you're considering pastoral ministry, just know you want something good. You do want something good. What I said a moment ago is how bad you want it. Just kind of want it, right? Is it like a toy to put on the shelf? Then it's gonna. You pick up this sword, it fights back. Right? so be ready, right? But it's a good work. And then it lists a bunch of qualifications for those who are aspiring to this office, including to be blameless. Fascinating word, often translated as above reproach. The husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, but not covetous. One who rules his own house well, having his own children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest he be puffed up with pride, and he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. And then lists deacons next, which were like associate pastors, effectively, in the early church, and would have been involved with the doorkeeping and the supper quite a bit, I imagine. So, and also the poor distribution. So your question is, in that big list, the husband of one wife, what does that mean? And you first said polygamy, and the answer is yes. That a man who has 2 or 3 wives is not qualified for the office of Christian overseer, that is the preacher and face and voice of God at the local congregational level. Why? Well, because Christianity is a restoration of paradise, and paradise was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Eve and Jenny. It just wasn't that. And so, Lamech, notwithstanding, and his great boast of I have killed a man and I got a couple women with me now, that's not a good thing. And even though in the Old Testament and in various times of history, for the sake of survival, multiple women have associated with individual men and borne them children, and the men have cared for those children, raised those children, and given them inheritance as sons, and that this is not necessarily sin, it is neither upright, righteous, straight, exactly the way that it's supposed to be. And so Christianity, knowing that, strives for, in its visible symbolic head, someone who is going to be married just to one wife, because that's what marriage really is supposed to be. So from there then, polygamy, I'm pretty sure that was not your actual problem, right? And he listed past. So first off, committing adultery, breaking the 6th commandment, sometime in life, 17, 15, 25, 35? When did that happen? If you were to apply that bar to the preaching office, that any man who, while he was not actively thinking like a Christian, committed the grievous sin of sexual immorality, porneia, if you were to apply that as a restriction, that any man who had done that once in his life could never be a pastor, even after he repented, I'm not sure. There'd be a lot of errors with no pastors, right? St. Augustine's confessions are written because he had lived that life and he repented of it, and he ends up as effectively a preacher, right? So the qualification is not about past sin in times of ignorance. The qualification is now. Divorce makes this squishier and harder, because if you are a divorced man, then this other bit about how you need to keep your children in submission and rule your house well, because if you don't, you won't be able to handle the church. Well, you need to take that real seriously. You got divorced, it means you probably don't know what you're doing. Sorry, it's it. And so maybe not. But that doesn't mean that a man who was divorced at some point in his life, many years later, married to one wife, with a Christian family, in all faith, and fully repenting of what he did because he did it in ignorance, that man could be qualified for the office of the ministry. He's a man of one wife. That's what he's going to be. He repented. So being repentant does not disqualify you from the office of the pastor. Right? Rather, it brings you into that office. But now, these things, if a man is living in current action against this, right? If he's pursuing divorce while he's at the seminary, right? Like, this is not going to go well. It's just not going to go well. A guy who is going to go through a divorce in a parish, it's not going to go well. It's going to harm the church. It's going to harm Christian consciences. And so that's what Paul's getting at here. So I would encourage you where you are right now to believe that you are qualified so far as husband of one wife is concerned, although certainly you want to be open with the seminaries about your past divorce, and you won't be the first, and they won't say no because you did that. They'll respect that. Given, assuming that it all is what you said, that it was a time of ignorance, it was a time of foolishness and wickedness, you've repented of that, and now your Christian faith is really what you're living. And now, having done that for some time, you want to pursue the office of preacher. But then I would really encourage you to look at that other verse I mentioned, verse 4, rule your own house well, children in submission with all reverence. That's pretty... It's pretty important. The other one that's up there is that able to teach bit. I can't see it, but I know it's there. Able to teach. Verse 2 at the end of it, after hospitable and sober-minded. Able to teach. If you don't like talking in front of people, it's just gonna. You could get good at it. You can get good at it, but you kind of gotta want to. You really gotta want to be in front of people. If you want to just be a monk who studies in a corner, get an MA in theology and try to get a job teaching at an adjunct faculty or something like that. You got to want to be in front of people, and then not only got to want to be in front of people, but when you talk, they have to be like, oh yeah, okay. And I don't mean like they do what you say. I mean, you always make sense when you talk. And if you're not a good communicator, you don't make sense when you talk. You say stuff and people go, what do you mean? Like, and that happens a lot, or you're not aware that it happens. That's even worse, right? Then maybe it's not the job for you. And that's not a bad thing, because what I really want you to see also is like, we need good Christian laymen desperately and badly. We need Christian families desperately and badly. So yeah, do we need preachers? Absolutely. But we need preachers who are able to teach. We don't need any more preachers who can't teach. We really don't. There's plenty of them out there. And we don't need anyone who can't manage their family, right? We don't need anyone else who's going to go out there and get a divorce 10 years into ministry because their wife didn't want to be a pastor's wife, right? We don't need any more of that. We've had plenty. And this list here would prevent such things. But don't expect the institutions or the princes that be to apply this list perfectly. Since you want to be a pastor, maybe start applying it to yourself. And frankly, Christian men, this is how we should all strive to be like this list here. This is exactly who we are to be publicly as Christian men in the world. And not in a sense of like, oh, how close am I to blameless? Am I 100% blameless? Oh no, I'm only 90% blameless today. My heart and my faith must have fallen. Like, no. It just means like, I want to strive to have integrity. Like, I want to be known. When you talk to me, like Tommy said this to me at Core the other day. He's like, you didn't say integrity, but he effectively said like you're a man of integrity. And what he meant was like, I trust you. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay, well, that's who we should be. We should all be trustworthy. Right? It doesn't perfectly all the time. If I have bad thoughts, no, it's get out of the Protestant like fruit checking ladder climbing game, and see blameless as something to aspire to. It's like another part of that word blameless. It really means whole or complete. It's like the opposite of that word is hypocrite. Right? Don't be a hypocrite. Like, don't be two-faced. Don't say one thing, do another. Yeah. Be complete. Be whole. Have integrity. Pursuing this list, men, is just really a good thing. And so then also for you who are considering seminary, all of it's imperative. Hospitality, gentleness, right? So little gentleness from Lutheran Church Missouri Synod pastors. So little, and so forth. Good testimony among those who are outside too. That means you should be able to walk into like a bar or a cigar club and make friends. You should be able to walk up to the bar, buy a drink, and start making friends. Just because you don't have to every day. I'm not saying like this is your mission every day. I'm saying you should be able to do that. Anyone who's an outsider shouldn't think you're too weird. So, are you wearing your Spock ears everywhere you go? Those got to come off when you put the collar on. Yeah. All right. That's probably enough, right? Do you want to say any additional thoughts?
Your comment about a pastor should be able to make friends easily, and that we as Lutherans have a hard time being gentle. Reminded me of part of your discussion on Brief History of Power, episode 130, where you guys were talking about how pastors are there to feed, not to shut people up, you know, and we, even as Christians, not just pastors, but when we're faced with something that, well, where truth is concerned, we should not get angry. There isn't, it's not necessary for us because it's truth. And so if somebody's going to spout about untruth, well, we can let them. But to be gentle and have that spirit is so important. So it was just.
I agree. I agree. It really is. I remember a story that another pastor told me. I was speaking somewhere way back in broken days, and I wish I knew who this guy was. I don't know who he is. He's somewhere in the synod. He was about 10 years older than me, so he's still got to be out there. But he was real excited to meet me, and we just ate across the table from each other. And he shared his journey and how he, I don't know, young manish, 22, 23, was an atheist, and but he was really interested in this girl who was a Lutheran, and he went to her church, and on the way out, he was all prepared to meet the pastor, but make sure the pastor knew that yeah, I'm here and I'm gonna be friendly, but I'm never gonna believe this nonsense, and he kind of said that to the pastor, like I don't believe any of this, but I'm glad to be here, and the pastor didn't even talk back, just turned away from him and started talking to somebody else. And it pissed him off so much, he came back and started listening.
I love that.
Yes. It's amazing.
I love that grit. Like that you know the truth enough that you don't need to cast your pearls before
And let me
swine.
suggest to you that was gentleness. It was gentleness. He did not respond. The only real response you have is dismissal, attack, or something. He just non-engagement. The gentleness, yeah. So some power in that little story, in that word there.
So when we think about the concept of the unforgivable sin, denying the Holy Spirit,
it's saying that Jesus has a devil, is the devil. It's saying that the Holy Spirit is the devil. That's the blasphemy.
Okay. So as an atheist, he was just an ignorant person.
Well, so every unbeliever is committing the unforgivable sin until they believe.
Okay.
The unforgivable sin is unbelief.
Right. So if you have a Christian, grows up Christian, is baptized as an infant, and then so it would be the opposite. Baptized as an infant, grows up as a Christian, and then in young adulthood says, I don't believe any of that stuff.
That person
we can just look at that person and turn away.
Yeah.
Without saying anything, and that can be considered gentleness. But that person isn't necessarily going to hell in that moment.
If they died,
if
they might.
a rock fell on his head.
So this is just it.
But
the unforgivable sin is forgivable.
Christ is still true to his promise at your baptism.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the unforgivable sin is forgivable if only you would believe you're forgiven. But the problem is that the only thing you won't believe is that you're forgiven. And so you're unforgivable, not because it can't be done, but because you won't receive it.
Right.
And you're vitriolically opposed to being forgiven. So that then is to choose unforgiveness. It's us that damn, ultimately. It's our own actions going to their own ends. Yeah.
Okay.
And when someone makes a show of their unbelief, no, you don't have to respond at all. Why? That's what they want. They're trying to get a rile out of you. All right. So, did I go too far? I went too far. We need this one. There it is. Elise asks, why, when LCMS baptizes an infant, do we parents, sponsors, congregation answer questions on behalf of the child. Why don't we just baptize with water and the word? Why the extra questions? Thank you, Elise. I think that's like a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes from inside a very individualistic way of thinking about humanity. So, first off, nothing that happens around the baptismal font is the baptism, except for the baptism. So, you could, in fact, just bring the baby, make sure you got the baby's name right, and go. Okay? Like, it's that easy. But we don't do that. Instead, we declare to everybody present what this baptism is putting, baby or adult, doesn't matter, putting the human being into. Mm-hmm. We declare it, we confess it, we witness it, we testify. And at that moment, as we, as a people, are testifying through calling to voice the witness of a new convert who can voice for themselves, we are hearing their confession of what we believe, and they are joining us. When parents bring an infant, the infant cannot do that, but the parents can, and they're part of us too. So it's not as though they're like, they're speaking for the infant as if their little voice is entering the infant's heart, and now the infant is speaking through. No. They're just part of the community, bringing the infant to this teaching. Because that's all we're doing for all of us. Even the individual who stands there and says, I believe in Jesus Christ, I believe in the Father. Like, it wasn't on that reason that your activity doing that made you righteous and now will baptize you. All of that was given to you. And it's part of what we say. And we say it together. So the reason that the group speaks is because that's what's going on the whole time. The group is speaking. The whole time. And so in the moment where any individual cannot speak, the group speaks. Right, we pick it up. Now, on this, I definitely want to look at, I mean, I don't know, these arguments about babies and baptism forever and ever and ever, but like, look, Luke 15, right? Is it 15? 18. Luke 18, verse 15. Then they also brought infants to Jesus that he might touch them. So, why do the parents answer for the child? Well, they brought their infant to Jesus that he might touch them. That's it. I mean, did you think that they came to Jesus on the hillside and didn't talk? Stand there with the baby. Jesus, baptize our baby. Right? We believe in you. Right? Or baptize our baby. Bless our baby.
Mm-hmm.
We believe in you. What the parents are doing when they're speaking for the child in the rite of the liturgy is joining the church's confession of what the baptism is into as they bring their child to Jesus that he might bless their child. And then that child is blessed not by the confession. The confession is confessing the blessing. The blessing is the baptism into Christ that then takes place to the child and to the adult in the same way, which is without any words at all, actually, from the baptizee. Right? Once you go into get the water, you don't say nothing. It's all done to you. Mm-hmm. Even the Baptists, So, on that level, to see that the liturgical trappings around it, it belongs to the community as our statement of what we believe we're doing. And so someone's going to say it. And if the individual is able to say it, they say it. And if they can't, then we help. It's just that easy. But it isn't as though that's what on the basis of that confession, therefore we baptize. So it's because the parents spoke for the child that we know the child believes. And so now we'll baptize the child because they believe and the decision's been made. Like that's the individualistic anthropology of decision theology coming to you, through kind of the water, as it were, of America. So.
Yeah. And it makes me think also about the breaking down of the idea of headship.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
If we had a stronger view of what the Father represents, then there would be no question of women's suffrage in the church, or why would the Father not speak for the child, mm-hmm. or that type of concept. Once feminism gets in hard, and it starts to break everything down.
Yeah. It's not just feminism, but it's the abolition of man, and it is wokeism. It is the beast. It is Antichrist. Antichrist is anti-man.
Yeah, like that's at the heart of it. Mm-hmm. Truly,
the beast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's enough for that one. Unless you
How
want
well,
more.
it brought a question to my mind that's kind of the flip side of this. So how then does it work when a person loses their mental faculties in elder years, and then cannot speak the Apostles' Creed or confess the faith in order to receive the Lord's Supper? Like, why does the congregation then not? Why are we not able to speak for that person then?
Yeah. So, the next question.
Oh, wow.
If I can get there.
Then I'll just wait.
Here it is. It says, at the end of episode 77, Don't Settle for Guilt, you discuss the argument from silence that since there is no historical specific mention of baptizing an infant, some conclude it is not permitted. You then mentioned the idea of not communing women for the same reason. I did, as something of a tongue-in-cheek pointing out of how ludicrous the argument from silence really is. I am wondering if you can discuss communing children. My understanding is that the Eastern Orthodox do commune children, and my own uncertainty about why they commune children while the Western Church does not. My uncertainty is about that. My sense was that it was rooted in the idea that the pastor has the obligation to ensure that the communicant is worthy and that they share the same faith. As applied to our children, how does this not become some sort of cognitive or decisional conditionality on faith and a receipt of the sacrament? Why does it apply to the supper and not to baptism? If you could expound on why we don't commune children, why it is different than baptism, and what Scripture does or does not say about communing children, that would be much appreciated. Thank you, Justin, he says. So the same question, actually. Yeah. I've got my grandma with Alzheimer's, and she's basically a baby in an adult's body.
Right.
Could I baptize her? That's a funny thing to think about.
Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't even thinking about that side of the story.
Because if I'm going to hold the argument consistently all the way through, which I'm going to try, then that would mean, I could, and I probably should. If her kids brought her to me, or her husband, or I don't know, if the nursing home in which she went to dwell. I think Catholics do this, by the way. I really think the nuns do it. They do secret baptisms, which isn't necessarily good.
No.
Secret's not good. But could you baptize someone with Alzheimer's if they were brought to the church? I don't know why not. But communion now is yes, speak about it, how it's different than baptism. And, well, one of the things we get in a little bit of trouble with is we adopt phrases for shorthand discussing things. And so in Lutheranism specifically, we have this idea of the sacraments. Oh, what's that? Oh, baptism and the Lord's Supper. And as a result, we treat them like they're the same thing. They're both a sacrament. But that word sacrament's not a biblically defined word. That comes from Augustine, actually, just talking about mysteries. And he was in no way trying to create a category of thought when he called them this, but that's what it became, was a category of thought. So now we try to judge supper and baptism in this category called sacrament, rather than what does the Bible say about baptism? What does the Bible say about the Lord's Supper? Let's do those things, right? And so God bless us, Lutheran practice is based not upon the meaning of the word sacrament, but the meaning of the text about baptism and the supper, right? So here now, what about communing children, and why not? Now, interestingly to me, you said children and not infants, because I think there's a pretty swell, large, big distinction between, say, a 6-month-old and a 7-year-old, or a 10-year-old. And in that regard, why do we not commune children? Actually, in the LCMS, we do. There are plenty of congregations that commune people as low as 6 and 7 years old, an age at which the child is able to give a confession that they desire the supper and they believe it to be Jesus Christ risen from the dead. And at the place where they're able to give that confession, there are many pastors who are willing to then hear that confession and bring them into the supper. There is also a large, I think, minority, an older population base, largely, who thinks that, nope, you can only commune once you turn 13, and you have to go through 2 years of class before you do it. And that's also something you'll find. Maybe that's more of what you've experienced where you are. At St. Paul here in Rockford, I try to treat each confirmand as an individual, which means that they don't all ripen and bear fruit at the same time just because they all got their junior high hormones, right? Now that they've all had those hormones, now they all can commune. Well, and actually, for some of them, they're worse off than they would have been if they started communing 3 or 4 years ago, because now they lost their heads, and you didn't get them. And so I'm striving to ask parents to teach at home, to learn very basic things about the Lord's Supper, very basic things about sin and forgiveness, 31 questions, mostly based on Luther's Small Catechism, and that when your kid knows that, then let's just talk and sit down and then get going on the Lord's Supper. But the kid has to demonstrate a desire for the Lord's Supper. And that's really what I'm looking for more than anything. Like you as an individual believe this is your religion and you think you need it. Well, then, since you're my member, you're not like a passing by, well, then let's start feeding that faith. Why not that for infants though? Because to me, that's the bigger question here. And well, I'll break this one to you too. Believe it or not, there are LCMS congregations that commune babies. Not a lot of them, and they haven't exactly helped us unify. Because it's just one more thing we're disagreeing over, but they're out there. They're out there, and so that's something to be aware of. By and large, even most Missouri Synod pastors who think that we should lower the communion age to when they're ready, from only once you graduate 8th grade, most are not going to say let's commune them right out of the womb. Most are going to say let's elicit a confession of faith for them. This is based upon 1 Corinthians 11, which is what we're going to go to. So to understand why we do this, as opposed to the Eastern Orthodox that have a different practice, it's all going to come out of 1 Corinthians 11. And if we're wrong about 1 Corinthians 11, then we're wrong. And so we're going to go there. But I would insist, though, that the distinction between the East and us on this is just way more complex. Way more complex than as simple as they practice it, and so therefore there must be something they know that we don't know. So be careful when you're looking at the exotic forms of Christianity and what they're doing culturally, because the orthodoxy where it exists is effectively a life system too. Like it's a little more like Islam, where your whole life is going to revolve around what the church says. And in that regard, there are cultural bindings that take place, and for them, communion infants, it's kind of like, how do I say? It's a cultural power for them. That this is something that they have done for a very long time, and you can go in and say it's not biblical and it's not going to matter, because again, they believe they've inherited it from long before as a Christian practice. We've inherited not doing it. So, like, what's the right practice? How would you know? And given that the East is so mystical and confused and hidden compared to like the way you try to talk justification with someone from the East, you'll very quickly find how difficult conversations can be. They use different categories, just thinking different ways. So to just say, well, they do it, why don't we do it, is super dangerous. You did point out, though, like there's this specter of rationalism going on here too, which is like the kid has to have enough brain to come to Jesus or something like that. And then again, the question is like, well, why not for baptism, but for the Lord's Supper? Well, again, the baptism is go baptize all nations. Baptize all nations. Everybody, bring them in. And you see whole families being baptized. You see, again, people bringing children to Jesus. There is not a text in the New Testament that says, now before you get baptized, make sure about this. There's not a single text that says that. That's where like sacrament language doesn't help us now, because there is a text about the Lord's Supper that says before you eat the Lord's Supper, think about this. Okay, so this doesn't exist for baptism. It doesn't say this about baptism. You can say, but they're the same thing. Okay, that's your philosophy. It doesn't say that. Baptism says, come to me, all you who are weary, heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Right, go to all nations, make disciples. Here in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, though, I'm still on Luke 18. We're going to start in verse 26. There's a lot more about the Lord's Supper before this, but we're coming right after the words of institution, where Paul adds this little unique bit. As often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death till he comes. So there's something about our gathering around the supper that is the preaching to the world. It's kind of cool. And now here's this line that like closed communion, even for the Eastern Orthodox, is going to be based on, therefore, whoever eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. So what we know is that within the Christian congregation, because the Lord's Supper is an ongoing cultural unifying factor, that to abuse this is to destroy the congregation. Yeah. Could you abuse baptism? I'm sure there's a way. In fact, I can think of one. But baptism is not something that's holding the congregation together every single week. You could take that the wrong way. Actually, it is, but it doesn't happen in front of you every single week, right? Mm-hmm. And the supper is happening every single week. And so you're proclaiming Christ together at this space with this meal. And so if you're coming there in what it says is an unworthy manner, you're going to be blaspheming that proclamation. Now, to flip this, because your question said, isn't it about being worthy to commune? Just because you can commune in an unworthy manner does not mean you can be worthy to commune, okay? You can commune in a worthy manner. That doesn't mean it's because of your worthiness. Please see the distinction and know that for much of pietistic Lutheran history, that's the error that they made. It is, I must examine my heart to see whether I am ready and prepared and worthy to come and receive the grace. And that's wrong. That's not what it's saying at all. It's saying there's an unworthy way to receive the grace and there's a worthy way to receive the grace. And the unworthy way is to do it just for yourself, ignoring everybody else, because that's what's going on in the context. And the worthy way is to do it the way Paul says, waiting for one another and examining yourself. It will say, let a man, verse 28, examine himself, and so let him eat of the bread and drink of the cup. So there is an expectation that the Lord's Supper as a practice involves some meditation. There's meditation about what is taking place. Let a man do so as part of the worthy participation. Why? Because that's what it's giving him. It's providing you a contemplative gift. It's giving you the Word of God as food to eat, inwardly digest, right? Keep. All these words that can mean more than one thing, right? And so to know that that's part of the practice for the people, is to say that there are some who don't do that, and that because they will not view the supper as what it is for, then they should be excluded from the supper, right? And so in that regard, verse 29, he who eats and drinks in an unworthy manner eats and drinks judgment on himself, not discerning the Lord's body. For this reason, many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep. What does that mean? Death? Falling away from the faith? I'm not sure. For if we would judge ourselves, we would not be judged. But when we are judged, we are chastened by the Lord, that we may not be condemned with the world. So the good news here is that in this whole writing, he's saying that you're drinking and eating unworthily of the Lord's Supper, and as a result, things are not good among you. Weak, sick, many sleep. So judge yourselves instead. Use the Lord's Supper as the moment where you pass judgment on yourself. Therefore, you will not be judged, because that's the work it does in your midst. So God's going to judge you by the law or the gospel. Which one do you want? How about you judge yourself as a people by the Lord's Supper? That way, chastened by the Lord, when we find that we haven't followed the law, we have somewhere to go. We may not be condemned with the world. And so even the person in this paragraph here, the Corinthians, who were drinking and eating unworthy and having punishments from God come upon them, Paul is saying that's only to bring you back to the faith. Yeah. And so it's not as though closing the communion rail or having excommunication as a practice or any of that is about driving people away. It's the other way around. It's about circling the herd unto a certain boundary and standing together inside of that. And then the question again is, so at what age does a baptized Christian welcome to do that according to the Bible? And if this text didn't exist, it'd be a pretty easy answer. But since this text exists, it's not, and there's been debate about it for a long time. And I would just suggest that the easy solution for we Protestant Lutherans is, well, let's commune them as soon as they can say they want it. Once they can say they want it and they don't think it's crackers and juice time, then they're ready, right? Let's bring them in. And I think that's actually the direction that a lot of the next era of Missouri Synod Lutheran pastors are going and see it. We don't want to knee-jerk our way down to paedo communion, and neither do we want to continue to let our children get away from us before we even get them into class. I mean, the kids are checked out by 7th grade. So, you gotta get them a little bit sooner than that, I think. So I feel like that was a very mediocre answer. I think I could do better, but that's all I got on that for the moment. So,
not to turn it to myself,
I like you.
What I've heard is that when a shut-in gets to a place where they cannot confess Christ as their Savior, then you withhold the Lord's Supper.
So for the same reason, at the point where where there does not seem to be any ability to cognizantly recognize anything that's happening, then the purpose of the supper, which is to feed the faith, I don't know. Is it doing it? There's doubt now. There's doubt about its usage.
So, I mean,
if you don't have a self, how can you examine it?
Right. I mean, we have DNRs,
Right.
But we don't have any sort of like, okay, well, if I get to this point, anoint me with oil so I can smell it. There's
right.
there's no planning for potential futures in that way.
Yeah. Anyone who's cared for late term Alzheimer's kind of stuff knows in a way that people who haven't experienced those last weeks and days, you just never really quite, you can't believe it. The human's a shell. They're a living shell. And I remember the fear, looking, because the eyes are just blank with fear.
Okay.
And you just don't know. You don't know what's there. You don't know if they can hear you. So what does a pastor do? He does what he knows he can do. So even if you can't hear me, the word of God is the word of God.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to speak the word of God. I'm going to speak the name of Jesus because there's a chance you can hear me. And that's where like baptism is like, baptism. Well, that's a thought there. Because they don't have to respond, honestly. But in terms of the supper, it's like, no, the supper, you have the supper.
Right.
You have the supper. You're fine.
There is.
You don't, and you're not needing it right now because you don't know.
Yeah.
And so
that makes sense.
Yeah. So we're consistent, I think, officially in our teaching on this, although you'll find a good number of pastors who will go ahead and commune them anyway. Mm-hmm. And so, you're going to find differing practices from different pastors on this.
Well, and it's so tricky because you cannot ask them, what's it like? What would be helpful or reassuring as you go through this time of fear?
What is nice, the good side of the story is that people who have forgotten the names of their children will begin to recite the Lord's Prayer with you.
Right.
And that is a combination of the holiness of the prayer, but also with the placement of it in the liturgy as a mantra. You used that word earlier today.
Yeah.
It's a mantra. You say it until it becomes one with you. And at some point you say it even without knowing its meaning, but nonetheless it does a work in and around you. Mm-hmm. And it's not as though you're going to strive to ignore the meaning. You're probably going to shame yourself. Oh, I wasn't paying attention for 3 sentences, and bring yourself back to it. But as a mantra, as something that is constantly and consistently put back into the life of the brain, creating a channel in the head, like a literal divot in your brain made of electricity that's gaping wide, and is the Lord's Prayer. And all other thoughts have to flow through and pass that thing. And it's the last thing to go hard when your brain turns to rock, which hardening of the brain is what these diseases do.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And it's why we should advocate for liturgical form. You don't have to do it just like I do it, but if you don't have the Lord's Prayer in your service every week, like, man, you're just missing opportunities for like lifelong discipleship. Basically, you need to memorize something as a people. You should. I mean, golly, put Psalm 23 in there, then at least do something. Every week. Don't change it every single week.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit of a tangent there.
Well, it brought to mind this thought, like, I guess why I'm so curious is I think if I'm watching the trend, I think that Alzheimer's and dementia isn't going to become less of an issue for our elderly. I feel like it's going to become more.
And earlier.
Yes. And so, and And so my thinking is like, as a pastor, like to have a game plan for ministering to that that suffering human is maybe a good idea. And I'm wondering if, like you mentioned, that the Lord's Prayer brings it's deeply embedded in them. And so if somebody is diagnosed with Alzheimer's or some sort of cognitive degenerative disease, beginning to utilize, like, obviously encouraging daily recitation as they enter into this.
Absolutely. That would be a
struggle
good thing to do.
is a good thing. But then introducing to them that they could even go get some of the myrrh that you anoint a person with before, the oil that you would anoint with before they go into surgery or before they go. I think it's in their last rite, correct? But as they're dying, just to have that be a part of potentially how they could be reminded of whose they are, who they belong to, and where they're heading.
Yeah, those are all good things. But it doesn't resolve the tension in the answer to the question, which is, like, effectively, why closed communion at all? Because you're closing the table to the infant, you're closing the table to the outsider. And why is that? And the answer that we have is 1 Corinthians 11 has this paragraph that sets the supper apart and says it's for examination. It's part of it. It's what it does to you and for you. And so you've cared for this person for years as a pastor. You've watched them decline. And it's at the point where they don't even know you when you walk in the room. Well, how are they going to remember Jesus at that moment in that supper? I mean, maybe they will. But
and so what you're getting at is, like, the purpose behind the Lord's Supper needs to be clearly understood. And that's what we're losing when we start to ask, well, why not this person? Why not that person?
Yeah. The purpose is to feed the congregation's faith weekly as a confidence of their being one with Christ again this week as we walk toward death. Baptism is a once-for-all deliverance that is imputed to you.
Right.
They're just very different things. And that's where the language of the sacraments, while helpful, is really not. It's done a lot of damage, actually, thinking of baptism and the supper as kind of like the same-ish.
Yeah.
You know? And then having word and sacrament, I don't know. We Lutherans are going to talk about baptism and the supper as the New Testament in Christ's blood. He didn't send circumcision. He didn't send sacrifices. He sent water and bread and wine. And so we're going to talk about those things. And we're going to make use of them. But we will grow in our understanding of their use if we can see them as two very different things. Two gifts. And the one is Christ's death, really, baptism, and resurrection, and the other is his flesh, and they're not divorced from each other either, right? The dangers are like that. You divide it so much you divorce them. No, you got to hold the tension there. But then the practice of the two is going to be pretty different. Yeah. We got one more, and it's the longest one, and it's a good one. I mean, it's insightful. Oh, I tell you, though, I'm not good at this. There we go. I was reading Exodus 20. Oh, did she have the... I got to share with you the email this lady sent, because she said nice things about you.
Oh,
really nice things about you.
So sweet.
I was reading Exodus 20, and verse 24 to 26 jumped out at me, specifically the second half of 24. In every place where I record or remember my name, I will come to you, and I will bless you. As a Lutheran, I saw this promise pointing to not just the sacramental promise of the Old Testament saints, but the institution of the Lord's Supper and the words "in remembrance of me" that Jesus spoke. I wondered, was he bringing to remembrance this promise from Yahweh to the minds of the disciples present at the Lord's Supper? I am learning Greek, but I know nothing about Hebrew except what tools I can look at to help with understanding. I don't know how to find a meaning beyond remember that would be acceptable to someone who denies the sacrament. Kyle and Dalich says this, that Jehovah should bring his name to remembrance does not mean to make the name of the Lord to be remembered, that is, to cause men to remember it, but to make a revelation of his divine nature, and to consecrate the place into a holy soil upon which the Lord will come to Israel and bless it. Kretzmann says, the children of Israel were not to make and place on a level with Jehovah for purposes of worship idols of any kind, which they then would regard as, forgive me while I get more up here, their gods. Such offerings were a type and figure of the heart of man, as it arose in true worship to the throne of God, for which reason also plain ground. The soil, as the Lord created it, was the material which he preferred, that being found practically everywhere where the children of Israel would assemble for worship. In all places where I record my name, I will come unto thee and will bless thee. God is confined neither to the temple nor to the tabernacle, but is... Sorry, everybody, I moved something and it lost my place. But is able to reveal his glorious majesty at any place which he may choose. And wherever this takes place, those who are fortunate enough to be witnesses of such a revelation will become partakers of God's blessings. It is this fact which is of such great value to us believers of the New Testament, since we have the assurance that the presence of the Lord in the Word and in the sacraments guarantees to us his blessings. Now, that was all from Kretzmann. So Kyle and Dalich is a Old Testament commentary. Kretzmann is a series, I think it's a full Bible commentary. Kretzmann's okay. I like Kyle and Dalich. What can you find in Hebrew that supports what K and D and Kretzmann say? In this, I find that it is essentially saying that no true altar exists or is authorized without God's presence, and that his presence is only found among those who keep, I can't read it from here, tereo, that is, who guard, cherish, obey is fine, but guard is really better, his commandments, and trust his promises to be with us and make us fit for his presence, his holy presence. Thank you, and God bless. Jill. So, you're asking, Exodus 20, what is this word that's there in red on the screen for you, translated as record or cause to remember in ESV, I think. What does this mean? And is there a connection point to the Lord's Supper? And then, Kyle and Dalich and Kretzmann took you in various ways to get there. And I don't know that I want to engage them as much, but I can definitely tell you about this word here. But let's read the whole section too. So this is right after the Ten Commandments, by the way. Like the people ask God not to speak. Right? He gives the Ten Commandments. They say, don't speak. And then God says to Moses, first thing you get not directly from God's mouth through Moses, thus you shall say, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven, right? So it starts out by pointing out, I just spoke from the mountain, God's own holy voice. And so I'm real. Verse 23, you shall not make anything to be with me, gods of silver or gods of gold, you shall not make for yourselves, right? So reiterating the second commandment of having no other gods alongside of or with Jesus, with Yahweh. And the way that you're to do this then is you're to have an altar of earth for him, and shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your oxen. So God commands that they as a people have altars of earth, as opposed to what we'll see later, altars of hewn stone, right? And eventually Israel's going to end up at a place where they do have, permanent altars, but they're moving and traveling. So they're building altars out of earth at various places, I think. But, journeying the wilderness, one thing, but like Shiloh, right? Is what I'm talking about. So he says, we get to the part of the verse you're talking about in the question, in every place where I record my name, I will come to you and I will bless you. And if you make to me an altar of stone, next verse, you shall not build it out of hewn stone, for you shall, if you use your tool on it, you have profaned it. Nor shall you go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed on it. Think of kilts. So in the midst of these rules about how to build the altar so that you don't look like those who have idols and false gods, right? So that you will be distinct. You can argue about, well, what's the difference between hewn stone and why is it an abomination? I'm sure there's wisdom in that. But we're just going to, again, in the midst of all of that, you get this promise. In every place where I record my name, I will come to you and will bless you. Now, it's coming up as a question because the word is often translated as remember or cause to remember. And I did go and look it up today, did a little work on it. It's zakar, Z, not Zed. What is that? Zion. That's it. It's Zion Kaf Resh. And its most commonly used meaning is remember. But not the way we think of that word remember. And this is where it really, when you get to the Lord's Supper part and do this in remembrance of me, this is where it does really impact quite a bit. And you're right. This should influence the way we hear how Jesus talks about instituting remembrances. For sure, right? You should read this into him. So, but for the American, in remembrance of me, remember means like internally, it means meditate. They mean contemplate. There's words for that in Hebrew. And this word could actually kind of mean meditate sometimes, but only as an act of remembering, which is more about not forgetting. So if you can think of this word is the opposite of forgetting. Right? To remember is not to forget. It isn't about how you feel while you think about things. It's the fact that you thought about it again, that it came back to you, right? But that's just it. So the word only means remember after it first means to think about. Because what are you doing when you remember something? Well, you're thinking about it. But then it can also mean much more than just think about it. It can mean to recite it. It can mean to invoke it. So it's the root of the word invocation, right? What am I doing when I invoke? I'm remembering to call upon my God. Okay, so you can see the remembrances going on there too. And then probably the most substantial meaning of it is just to pay attention. So every place where I pay attention to my name, well, it doesn't quite fit there, but somewhere where I put my name for you to pay attention to it, that's maybe a little more of the action there, right? It can refer to inner mental acts that result, it does refer to inner mental acts that do result in external actions. And so again, to invoke, to declare, to bring to remembrance is not merely a matter of remembering, but of doing something because you remembered. Right? And this is maybe the most important piece of this. So when God in the Old Testament remembers, he's not sitting somewhere thinking, he's acting. So like you're in pain and he remembers you and then he takes away your pain. Right? That is the heart of this word for God. When he remembers, he acts, right? It's not just for God, for everybody. To remember is to act. So then it goes even more, so that this word, zakar, which is a verb and then has a noun that is based on it, has a second noun that grows out of it that is zakaron. And this is the word that is, if not here in Exodus 20, it's in Exodus 12:14 at the Passover, it's at Exodus 13:9 at the delivery of the manna, and it is the word memorial, or token, or record, or even liturgy. And this thing, this zakaron, this memorial, this remembrance, is always an object or an act that brings to mind something else. And all of these meanings, when I research these Hebrew words that have multiple meanings, they have edges to each other, but you can usually figure out where they actually made a note that said, it's usually hard to figure out which one of these meanings is the right meaning, which means that all of them are the same thing. To remember is to recite, is to pay attention, is to think about, is to invoke, is to declare, is to not forget, right? Those are all the same thing. But so this word, memorial, a thing that brings to mind something else, well, in every place where I bring to mind my name, I will come to you and I will bless you. So the action of remembering here is God bringing his name into your mind, and that the promise is that wherever he does that, it's going to be a blessing to you. And since the Lord's Supper is where he does that, and in fact says, I'm doing this as my memorial, I mean, it's right there, right? Or think of baptism again. What is it that is being recorded on you? It is the name. Is the name of God. And so he will come to you and bless you through these things. Yeah, absolutely. We should see that there. I think of all the things to take away from this is just to see how the Hebrew understanding of remembrance also means act, also means speak and do. And so when Jesus says, "This is my remembrance, do this," the whole thing is a testimony of his memorial. It's to bring him back to mind for all of this. It's not as though the Baptists are wrong to remember the cross when they take the Lord's Supper. They're not wrong. It's just they think that's all there is. And that's just part of it, because wherever it is, he's going to bless you. Then they say it doesn't bless you, it doesn't do anything. But wherever his name is, it's going to do something. It just said that, right? You're getting half the gospel at that point. So it's not as though Baptists aren't Christians. They just, sacramentarians. You just got half the gospel. And that's why, you try to put your faith in mustard seeds and things like that. So, yeah. So I watched that one again this morning. So nice comments and not nice comments too. It's fun. Yeah. I think that's about all I can do on that there. Your hunch is great that you're digging into Cressman and Kylan Daly. So God bless you. You're studying, dude. Yeah. You're a wizard, Harry, then some. So it's pretty cool. On the screen, you can see how King James does say record, and then, footnote me from cause my name to be remembered. There's this thing that Hebrew does where it has a form called the hiphil. And, let's just say the hiphil is not the normal. The normal is, I went to the store. The hiphil is, I made you go to the store, or I made the dog go to the store. I caused the dog to go to the store. So whatever verb you have, of any verbs ever, you can put a different ending on it, and it always means you caused it to happen somewhere else. Yeah, it's interesting. But that's what's going on here. In every place where I cause for my name to be remembered, I will come to you. And see the action of God in this too, where he causes his name to be remembered, there will be blessing. Take and eat, in the name of Jesus, with the cross, sign of the cross, all that. So I hope that helps on that study and journey there for you. And if you have any thoughts coming out of that, we got 20 more minutes here to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Well,
or move on.
Do you have any more cards that you wanted to discuss this morning?
Got a bunch of stuff on next stuff in Mark. It's pretty exciting. But nothing else that I brought down from the desk with me, because I used those two other cards earlier. No. I could talk about, I don't know. I rediscovered some Christian music this week. Mm-hmm. I went and dugged a little bit for what happened was I got exposed to the Toby Mac Confab album, where he works with a bunch of other often almost unknown artists, and put together what I find to be some pretty fantastic music. I like hip hop. I like dubstep. I like rap. I like rock. All at once? Yes, please. With Jesus? All right then. So, him and Crowder joining together for a song. But out of all of this, like the guy that I just can't stop listening to this album now. His he goes by Neon Feather. Feather. And it is just pure Christian dubstep, which is like this kind of dance beat, heavy driving. And I can't get enough of it. It's so good. It's so good. So I highly recommend Neon Feather. He's got instrumental stuff. He's got stuff, and he doesn't sing himself. So every song where they're singing, it's a different artist singing. He's got a girl singing a couple times, got a guy singing a couple times. The text is pretty good. They're generally about Jesus. The one song that seems to be more of a love song is not about Jesus, but I really like it because it's all about these two young people who are in love, and they're driving a little fast, and the song goes, no, we're not safe. No, we're not safe. We're alive. And I don't know that I can really recommend driving fast and dangerous as a risk-seeking thing. But this idea that to be safe is to, in some respects, cease living. I like that a lot. actually. And so I really, and it's kind of a slower song. So it's moving and haunting. No, we're not safe, but we're alive. And like, don't that, yeah. Like as soon as you want to be safe, then you got to die. Once you die, you're safe. That's true. But until then, no, you're not safe because to be alive is to be at risk in this fallen creation. And so I really enjoyed that music. Also, kind of finding Rendemi and as Evan Carter and Jordan Feliz, guys who are like at least half, if not all, of their music is in Spanish. And so I'm listening to stuff about the Espíritu Santo and in Nombre de Jesús, and they're rapping this like and Rendemi. I mean, this guy's his rap's like rap. It's good, and it's got this very South American flair to it. And so what they're able to do with rap in Spanish with a South American kind of is pretty cool. Makes me want to know what they're saying more and more.
Yeah. But
some of them do crossover stuff. So Jordan Feliz's, I think it's Right Here Next to You or Right Here Next to Me. Oh man, that was great. So just encouraged by the fact that other Christians out there are producing stuff that is about trust. Had a great conversation with another Missouri Synod pastor over a couple of issues, great issues, the controversy issues, all this stuff. But he also just kind of affirmed how he's had this little bit of a revolution and a revelation where like he's just done being angry at Christians for trying because they did it a little bit wrong. He's just glad they're trying.
Right.
You know, and that they're Christians, because it's worse when they're not. And so, you know, for me, again, finding hope in that there are these huge Spanish-speaking swaths of Christianity. Sure, they might be Pentecostals, but what they're singing about is the grace of Jesus at the cross, you know, and the confidence to live in this present age under his kingdom. And come on, Lutherans, let's get on the bandwagon here a little bit. I don't mean you have to use theirs. Let's make some. Let's make some. Flame, I know Flame's out there. Where are the rest of you? Yeah, got to have more musicians. And I get it that Lutherans like Bach, and so we only do music for when you have to sit down and listen to it and pay attention to it. Yeah, anyway. That was a big part of my week. I really felt like I wasted Monday because it was like 6 hours of searching through music and deciding what I wanted to get and what I didn't want to get.
Wow.
And trying to get stuff the kids would also benefit from and that. And so I got done in 6 hours on the computer. Like I tell people, don't do this. I just did it. And man, did I feel sick and like I wasted my one day of rest. And I certainly didn't work on the electricity in the basement like I keep trying to do. But it's paid dividends to be able to just kind of, gosh, Christian music in the 90s was terrible.
Yeah.
and not just it was terrible theology, the music wasn't that good. It just wasn't that good. They've gotten good. Our Christian music artists have really figured out how to make music, and that's cool to me. That's exciting to me. And so again, now Lutherans, I mean, Hebrew and Collegium, Thursday afternoon conversations, right?
Okay.
Somehow we get into there's a Christian video game that's going to be released, and it's a big deal or something. I don't even know which one it is, but all I know about it is that you get to be David killing Goliath at one point. Okay. Which this has got to be like, you may not get this, but you're a video gamer. You're like, what? This is like the, what do they call it? Flash moments? They're not called flash moments. I'm going to lose it. Stop screen. When you play the game, you can do a combination of things that you're always doing to move your character, and you're controlling your character with your thumbs, or they can go into a scene where something happens and then you have to wait and hit the one button at the right moment and then hit the next one button at the right moment. And it's more like it's leading you, but it tells you what you're supposed to do. I mean, you're only going to throw one stone. So this doesn't sound like, to me, an action game. This sounds like bad stop time events. That's just me being a punk. The question was, can we use video games to promote Christianity? Is it possible? And I've shared before on this show the single video game idea that I have that I think could be putting the tool to the ultimate use, to the level of, because what it is a manipulation machine. It's a dream machine to provide someone an actual experience that would put them in a scenario where they would be exposed to almost the entirety of the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts through adventure and stealth. thinking that would be cool. VR. I'm talking VR. I'm talking Skyrim and Assassin's Creed meets the Book of Acts.
Okay.
Okay. The money, the time, the talent, the ability to do this well is beyond the reach of Christianity as an organization in the world today. The Catholic Church maybe could do it. Mm-hmm. Okay. But we just don't have that kind of capacity. I don't think it takes too much time, too much labor research. The number of artists making like all the grass in your video game, right? Like they're paying hundreds of people on each one of these games to like just draw background corner things. How are you going to get there? But that said, of all the ways I can imagine to really seed the gospel, I mean, that's a pretty powerful one, but I've got one that's even more powerful. And that's the point of the whole story. This goes back to where we were a moment ago. Here's what if I had $1 million, it's a song. It's a really horrible song. It's a horrible song. Don't listen to it. It's out there. If I had, and I'd need more than $1 million. If I had $1 billion and I wasn't starting the Hebrew Collegium, and I knew the guy who could do it, because I couldn't really do it. I'd need to like produce and have some other guy direct. I would try to target like 4, maybe 7, 14 to 17-year-old Lutheran men who can sing and dance and talk. And I would try to create a boy band that knew how to preach between songs. Ooh. You shiver with that at all? I do. I shiver with that. Like, can you imagine 4 19-year-old Lutherans who were K-pop? Mm-hmm. I mean, why not? Well, and go look up how to make boy bands. You need 2 to 3 years and a lot of money. These guys are going to be trained like boot camp for a long time. They're going to give up their lives to be what they are. So I'm not saying this is easy. It's not easy. I don't think we can do it. Big ideas, I got them. Local reality, that's reality. That's reality. So I do think Lutherans are out there who can make good music and should consider making good music. It doesn't have to be church music to be good music. Make church music too, but just make some good music. Mm-hmm. Man, make some good bluegrass. Make some good hip hop. I don't care. Whatever you listen to, make some. Yeah. We need it. It lifts the soul. It lifts the soul. Hello, sunshine. Goodbye, rain.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept.
I mean, you could do it. What does it matter, right? The boy band thing is, boy bands are made. Mm-hmm. They're made. And so, like, you can make one if you have enough money.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can make one. But, we'd rather fight about social justice on Twitter. That controversy is getting worse.
I figured, considering from the time we spoke about it last Saturday to Sunday morning, there was more information that was much more intense than we had realized.
Well, let's just say it exposes the cracks, the fissure cracks in the conservative alliance within the LCMS, and makes it a very real possibility that the guy who's running against Harrison, who is from my understanding, a big part of Lutherans for Racial Justice, which is a woke political organization in the LCMS, it's a good chance he wins this summer. Because the conservative base just had its leader not do what it wanted. And so it's going to split. It's going to split. Like, the base is going to split. Not everyone's going to vote for him now. There's no way around it. So by kowtowing, by bending to the shouting anger, this is what happens every time a conservative does this. They say, oh, we're sorry, and then they lose the next big moment because they actually gave ammo to their enemy.
Yeah.
So if there really is a threat of Nazis in the LCMS, well, then the guy whose platform is let's get rid of the Nazis is going to win over the guy who says, I didn't know about this, but we got to do something about it. No, you just lost. You just lost. The other guy, that's his campaign.
Yeah.
Oops. Darn it. So that means probably 3 years of a very different administration coming LCMS way. Mm-hmm. One in which, say, the Lutheran Witness talks about racism a lot more. and baptism a lot less. So just writing on the wall, everybody, I'm no prophet. I'm no prophet. And pray for your church body. But this conspiracy / crisis has gone from, guys, we don't need to do this in public to, we're burning it down in front of our own eyes.
Yeah, that's too bad.
So it is. And it's super wicked and potentially, I'm not going to say who said this to me, but he's smarter than I am. Smaller groups than the LCMS have had professional federal police officers secretly infiltrate their organizations to bring about woke societal change in them.
Wow.
This is known. Groups that are smaller than the LCMS have had this happen. Now, they're generally more politically active than the LCMS on paper, right? So it's LCMS has 600,000 members, so you got some group of 25,000 that does this big event every year somewhere where they're all working for like Second Amendment rights or something. And the feds will have a plant in that space, which if you're a good spy network, why wouldn't you? Well, so why would we think the LCMS doesn't? Why would we think we're big enough to be, or small enough to be off the radar when they go after smaller people than us? And we're pro-marriage, pro-life. Just that alone right there. Got to bring these guys down.
Yeah. Right.
So just see that maybe when there's a fire, someone else started it. And don't step in it. But we stepped in it. It's too late now. This one. Did I share this part with you? So like there is if I say Antifa Twitter site or Twitter account, remember how I said earlier, Antifa's like dispersed power. Like you just decide I'm Antifa and you start and then you network with people. So this doesn't mean this is the central hub for Antifa conversation, but there is an Antifa active Twitter account that said that what the LCMS has done is the model for all church bodies.
What?
Yeah. So our
modeling what?
Our response to attacking racism and Nazism in our members following an online Twitter kerfuffle over a scholastic resource and its footnotes, becoming a witch hunt for Nazis, and that the powers that be are going to use the powers to actually go after even members in congregations so as to remove them from the congregation, which is what has happened. Whether the guy's not someone I want to be associated with at all, but it's kind of strange to see the power structure go after the low the way they do, and then Antifa says that's what churches should be doing, and we're becoming their poster child for how to flip a church, basically. Wow. And they're saying that on their own Twitter feed. Again, so just don't walk in ignorance, right? Don't walk in ignorance. Don't assume that everyone who says I'm your friend is your friend. And then, talk about Jesus and see what they say. You think you can learn of somebody, find out what they think about Christ. They'll tell you who they are. But yeah, controversy, trial. I probably said too much already, too. Well.
It would seem that filling our minds, like you were saying, you fill your mind with words and then they just start coming out. And so using this opportunity, this time that we have, which is starting to look like unrest, but isn't complete unrest yet. So it is a time of peace to some extent, and using that time to essentially create ammo, which is just God's pure word. Amen. So that when we are faced with people who are infiltrating us, all we do is just speak scripture. And it's like, well, this is my opinion. Psalm. Mm-hmm. This is my opinion. Proverb.
No, that's right. That's right. The more the language can become your language, the more confident you're going to be when you speak. Mm-hmm. This is why it's an antidote to anxiety. Over time, not tomorrow, over time. It's just going to give you a reliance that is not on you. And wow, what a thing.
That's exactly right. And I kind of started speaking about the psychology behind why we read stories, and that was one of the things that it said is if you have a person who's struggling with anxiety or depression, then they can find in heroic tale a reason to live, and it's more like a trajectory that they get to see the end of. And so they start to have hope in their life. And so absolutely, our heroic tale is Christ crucified and resurrected and coming again to do that for the entire world. And all the saints. So, yeah.
The having the resolution of the story. I wish I'd heard you say that earlier.
Well, it was hard for it was an exciting conversation.
It was. Well, don't lose it now.
Having the resolution of the story
in the midst of your chaos. So your daily life's not going to get resolution.
Exactly.
And so to hear about resolution gives you hope that there will someday be resolution. Again, so, the fly and the jackrabbit from ancient Greek lore might give you hope that there'll be resolution, but it's going to be a false hope.
Right.
And the story of Christ gives you a hope that's not a false hope. And so all those other stories can only be valuable as they're tied to Christ's story, which means that not that I find Christ in them, that because I'm a Christian, I bring Christ to them. Right? I see Christ in The Lord of the Rings because I see Christ. Not the other way around. And the only thing that I go to where I see Christ is Scripture. That's where he comes from. And then his reflection of the other things, it's because he's in Scripture. And so it's about source in that regard. But and I really like that idea that it is our lack of resolution that makes us hunger for resolving stories, which is why you like to check off a list and have it done too, right? Like you want resolution. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're looking at me like I am the host of the show.
You are the host of the show. You're good at it.
I was specifically brought on to be color commentary, so give me something to color.
Well, it's time to wrap it up. So, hey, if you like what we do here at, you could try this one on some time. If you like what we do here at Stop the White Noise, you can support us at patreon.com/RevFisk or subscribestar.com/RevFisk. Subscription model there, a couple bucks a week, a couple more bucks a month. However you want to do it helps us make the wheels go round here in Rockford, Illinois, and all the other stuff too coming your way. Mad Christianity, Hebron Collegium, and the whatnot. Not so much Hebron Collegium. That is funded differently, but that's one. I feel like there was another announcement I wanted to repeat, and it would be...
Would it be the muster?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So don't forget that muster is coming on Memorial Day weekend of this year, the Sons of Solomon muster. And if you have not checked out sonsofsolomon.net to begin that practice, that prayer discipline, you should do that. Everything that is there on that site, including the Daughters of Wisdom practice, is available for free as a pamphlet. Just send a contact through that page. We'll send you 1 or 5 or 15 or 25, because if you want to give them away, that's what it's made for, is to give it away. So,
in preparation to come to that time and then have the tour of the Hebron Collegium. I have found reading through 1 Kings as well as Samson's story to be very, very informative as to where I stand in the Collegium and what's around me, what's surrounding me, and what's the story behind it all. So
that's
I
right.
guess I'll just say that.
That's right. You could spend some time in Genesis 32 as well. And a little bit of time in Acts 18. So there's some riddles built into everything, and indeed, who was Aruna the Jebusite, and what was important about his threshing floor. So yeah, the whole thing is a lore-based riddle. That's the goal. Just dive into Christianity and never let go. At Hebron here, right across the street, Lakewood Hills, Illinois. Check that out also at HebronCollegium.com. So, Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. That means you have been paid for, blood bought by his death and resurrection. That means, since you're blood bought and he is never going to die again, you're also immortal now. Oh, one of the Neon Feather songs is called Afterlife, and the whole thing is, I'm not going to wait for the afterlife. I'm going to live now. And the idea is like I'm already alive. I'm already resurrected.
He came into his position as a songwriter during 2020.
Maybe. What I think is it's like he's a Christian who's thinking about his faith. Mm-hmm. So anyway, you're immortal now, and Jesus will not be alone in bringing that afterlife, one way or the other, whether it's your own death or that final day. So remember that the water, as his name placed on you, which will always bless as he remembers you. The water seals it. The food feeds it. The memorial which he has established for the strengthening of your faith is going to do what it says. And this is Christianity. You should think about joining us and not wallow in the muck with those who have no hope. You've been listening to Stop the White Noise with Jonathan and Meridith. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Meridith.
Rock on. And I know it's Lent. I don't care. Hallelujah.
Was that worth $1? Click the Patreon link in the show notes to sign up. Pretty please?